It remains yet unresolved whether the happiness of a man in this world doth consist more in contemplation or action. Concerning which two opinions I shall forbear to add a third by declaring my own, and rest myself contented in telling you that both of these meet together, and do most properly belong to the most honest, ingenious, quiet, and harmless art of angling. And first I tell you what some have observed, and I have found to be a real truth, that the very sitting by the riverside is not only the quietest and the fittest place for contemplation, but will invite an angler to it. Isaac Walton. Dear human, old Isaac Walton discovered that nature study, fishing, and philosophy were akin and as inevitably related as the three angles of a triangle. And yet it is surprising how little the fish have been used as subjects for nature lessons. Every brook and pond is a treasure to the teacher who will find what there is in it, and who knows what may be gotten out of it. Luckily there are some very good books on fishes, which will assist materially in making the fish lessons interesting. Fishes, by David Starr Jordan, is a magnificent popular work in 2 volumes. American Food and Game Fishes, by Jordan and Everman, is one of the volumes of the valuable Nature Library. While for supplementary reading, the following will prove instructive and entertaining: The Story of the Fishes, Basket, Fish Stories, by Holder and Jordan. The Story of a Salmon, in Science Sketches, by Jordan. Neighbors with Wings and Fins, Johannot. Half Hours with Fishes, Reptiles, and Birds, Holder. Almost any of the fishes found in brook or pond may be kept in an aquarium for a few days of observation in the schoolroom. A water pail or bucket does very well if there is no glass aquarium. The water should be changed every day, and at least once a day it should be aerated by dipping it up and pouring it back from some distance above. The practice should be established, once for all, of putting these finny prisoners back into the brook after they have been studied. The Goldfish. Teacher's Story. Once upon a time, if stories are true, there lived a king called Midas, whose touch turned everything to gold. Whenever I see goldfish, I wonder if, perhaps, King Midas were not a Chinese, and if he perchance did not handle some of the little fish in Orient streams. But common man has learned a magic as wonderful as that of King Midas, although it does not act so immediately, for it is through his agency in selecting and breeding that we have gained these exquisite fish for our aquaria. In the streams of China the goldfish, which were the ancestors of these effulgent creatures, wore safe green colors like the shiners in our brooks, and if any goldfish escape from our fountains and run wild, their progeny return to their native olive-green color. There are many such dull-colored goldfish in the Delaware and Potomac and other eastern rivers. It is almost inconceivable that one of the brilliant-colored fishes, if it chanced to escape into our ponds, should escape the fate of being eaten by some larger fish attracted by its glittering bait. The goldfish, as we see it in the aquarium, is brilliant orange above and pale lemon yellow below. There are many specimens that are adorned with black patches, and, as if this fish were bound to imitate the precious metals, there are individuals which are silver instead of gold. They are oxidized silver above and polished silver below. The goldfish are closely related to the carp and can live in waters that are stale. However, the water in the aquarium should be changed at least twice a week to keep it clear. Goldfish should not be fed too lavishly. An inch square of one of the sheets of prepared fish food, we have found a fair daily ration for 5 medium-sized fish. These fish are more likely to die from overfeeding than from starving. Goldfish are naturally long-lived. Miss Ada Georgia has kept them until 7 years old in a school aquarium, and there is on record one goldfish that lived 9 years. Too often the wonderful common things are never noticed because of their commonness, and there is no better instance of this than the form and movements of a fish. It is an animal in many ways similar to animals that live on land, but its form and structure are such that it is perfectly adapted to live in water all its life. There are none of the true fishes which live portions of their lives on land, as do the frogs. The first peculiarity of the fish is its shape. Looked at from above, the broader part of the body is near the front end, which is rounded and pointed so as to cut the water readily. The long, narrow hind portion of the body, with the tail, acts as a propeller. Seen from the side, the body is a smooth, graceful oval, and this form is especially adapted to move through the water swiftly, and can be demonstrated to the pupil by cutting a model of the fish from wood and trying to move it through the water sidewise. Normally, the fish has 7 fins, one along the back called the dorsal, one at the end of the tail called the tail or caudal fin, one beneath the rear end of the body called the anal, a pair on the lower side of the body called the ventrals, and a pair just back of the gill openings called the pectorals. All these fins play their own parts in the movements of the fish. The dorsal fin is usually higher in front than behind, and can be lifted or shut down like a fan. This fin, when it is lifted, gives the fish greater height, and it can be twisted to one side or the other, and thus be made a factor in steering. The anal fin on the lower side acts in a similar manner. The tail fin is the propeller and sends the body forward by pressing backward on the water, first on one side and then on the other, being used like a scull. The tail fin varies in shape very much in different species. In the goldfish it is fan-like, with a deeply notched hind edge, but in some it is rounded or square. The paired fins correspond anatomically to our arms and legs. The pectorals represent the arms, the ventrals the legs. Fins are made up of rays, as the bony rods are called, which support the membrane. These rays are of 2 kinds, those which are soft, flexible, many-jointed, and usually branched at the tip, and those which are bony, not jointed, and which are usually stiff spines. When the spines are present in a fish, they precede the soft rays. Fish's eyes have no eyelid, but the eyeball is movable, and this often gives the impression that the fish winks. Fishes are necessarily nearsighted, since the lens of the eye has to be spherical in order to see in the water. The sense of smell is located in a little sac to which the nostril leads. The nostrils are small and often partitioned, and may be seen on either side of the snout. The nostrils have no connection whatever with breathing in the fish. The tongue of the fish is very bony or bristly and immovable. There is very little sense of taste developed in it. The shape, number, and position of the teeth vary according to the food habits of the fish. The commonest type of teeth are fine, sharp, and short, and are arranged in pads, as seen in the bullhead. Some fish have blunt teeth, suitable for crushing shells. Herbivorous fish have sharp teeth with serrated edges, while those living upon crabs and snails have incisor-like teeth. In some specimens we find several types of teeth. In others, the teeth may be entirely absent. The teeth are borne not only on the jaws, but also in the roof of the mouth, on the tongue, and in the throat. The ear of the fish has neither outside form nor opening, and is very imperfect in comparison with that of man. Extending along the sides of the body from head to tail is a line of modified scales containing small tubes connecting with the nerves. This is called the lateral line, and it is believed that it is in some way connected with the fish's senses, perhaps with the sense of hearing. Since fishes must push through water, which is more difficult than moving through air, they need to have the body well protected. This protection is, in most fishes, in the form of an armor of scales, which are smooth and allow the body to pass through the water with little friction. These scales overlap like shingles in a roof, and are all directed backward. The study of the fish scale shows that it grows in layers. In order to understand how the fish breathes, we must examine its gills. In front, just above the entrance to the gullet, are several bony ridges, which bear 2 rows of pinkish fringes. These are the gill arches, and the fringes are the gills. The gills are filled with tiny blood vessels, and as the water passes over them, the impurities of the blood pass out through the thin skin of the gills, and the life-giving oxygen passes in. Since fish cannot make use of air unless it is dissolved in water, it is very important that the water in the aquarium jar should often be replenished. The gill arches also bear a series of bony processes called gill rakers. Their function is to prevent the escape of food through the bullhead. Teacher's story. Or amongst stones in clear water, and in very hot days will lie a long time very still, and sun himself, and will be easy to be seen on any flat stone or gravel, at which time he will suffer an angler to put a hook, baited with a small worm, very near into his mouth, and he never refuses to bite, nor, indeed, to be caught with the worst of anglers. Isaac Walton. When one looks a bullhead in the face, one is glad that it is not a real bull, for its barbels give it an appearance quite fit for the making of a nightmare. And yet, from the standpoint of the bullhead, how truly beautiful those fleshy feelers are! For without them, how could it feel its way about, searching for food in the mud where it lives? 2 of these barbels stand straight up. The 2 largest ones stand out on each side of the mouth, and 2 pairs of short ones adorn the lower lip, the smallest pair at the middle. As the fish moves about, it is easy to see that the large barbels at the side of the mouth are of the greatest use. It keeps them in a constantly advancing movement, feeling of everything it meets. The upper ones stand straight up, keeping watch for whatever news there may be from above. The 2 lower ones spread apart and follow rather than precede the fish, seeming to test what lies below. The upper and lower pairs seem to test things as they are, while the large side pair deal with what is going to be. The broad mouth seems to be formed for taking in all things eatable, for the bullhead lives on almost anything alive or dead that it discovers as it noses about in the mud. Nevertheless, it has its notions about its food, for I have repeatedly seen one draw material into its mouth through its breathing motion, and then spew it out with a vehemence one would hardly expect from such a phlegmatic fish. Although it has feelers which are very efficient, it also has perfectly good eyes, which it uses to excellent purpose. Note how promptly it moves to the other side of the aquarium when we are trying to study it. The eyes are not large. The pupils are black and oval, and are rimmed with a narrow band of shiny pale yellow. The eyes are prominent, so that, when moved backward and forward, they gain a view of the enemy in the rear, or at the front while the head is motionless. It seems strange to see such a pair of pale yellow, almost white eyes in such a dark body. The general shape of the front part of the body is flat. In fact, it is decidedly pollywoggy. This shape is especially fitted for groping about muddy bottoms. The flat effect of the body is emphasized by the gill covers opening below rather than at the sides, every pulsation widening the broad neck. The pectoral fins also open out on the same plane as the body, although they can be turned at an angle if necessary. They are thick and fleshy, and the sharp tips of their spines offer punishment to whosoever touches them. The dorsal fin is far forward and not large. It is usually raised at a threatening angle. There is a little fleshy dorsal fin near the tail, which stands in line with the body, and one wonders what is its special use. The ventral fins are small. The anal fin is far back and rather strong, and this, with the long, strong tail, gives the fish good motor power, and it can swim very rapidly if occasion requires. The bullhead is mud-colored and has no scales, and since it lives in the mud, it does not need scales to protect it, but because of its scaleless condition, it is a constant victim of the lampreys, and it would do well, indeed, if it could develop an armor of scales against this parasite. The skin is very thick and leathery, so that it is always removed before the fish is cooked. The bullhead is the earliest fish of the spring. This is probably because it burrows deep into the mud in the fall, and remains there all winter. When the spring freshets come, it emerges and is hungry for fresh meat. The family life of the bullheads and other catfishes seems to be quite ideal. Dr. Theodore Gill tells us that bullheads make their nests by removing stones and gravel from a more or less irregularly circular area in shallow water and on sandy or gravelly ground. The nest is somewhat excavated, both parents removing the pebbles by sucking them into the mouth and carrying them off for some distance. After the eggs are laid, the male watches over and guards the nest and seems to have great family responsibilities. He is the more active of the two in stirring and mixing the young fry after they are hatched. Smith and Heron describe the process thus: with their chins on the bottom, the old fish brush the corners where the fry were banked, and with the barbels all directed forward and flexed where they touch the bottom, thoroughly agitate the mass of fry, bringing the deepest individuals to the surface. This act is usually repeated several times in quick succession. The nests are usually made beneath logs or other protecting objects and in shallow water. The paternal care is continued for many days after the birth of the young. At first, these may be crowded together in a dense mass, but as time passes they disperse more and spread around the father. Frequently, especially when the old one is feeding, one or more, of the young are taken into the mouth, but they are instinctively separated from the food and spit out. At last the young swarm venture farther from their birthplace, or perhaps they are led away by their parents. Lesson 37. The Bullhead, or Horned Pout. Leading thought: the bullhead lives in mud bottoms of streams and ponds, and is particularly adapted for life in such locations. Method: a small bullhead may be placed in a small aquarium jar. At first let the water be clear and add a little pondweed so as to observe the natural tendencies of the fish to hide. Later add mud and gravel to the aquarium and note the behavior of the fish. Observations. 1. What at the first glance distinguishes the bullhead from other fish? Describe these strange whiskers growing about the mouth. How many are there, and where are they situated? Which are the longest pair? Can the fish move them in any direction at will? 2. Where do we find bullheads? On what do they feed? Would their eyes help them to find food in the mud? How do they find it? 3. Explain, if you can, why the bullhead has barbels, or feelers, while the trout and bass have none. 4. What is the shape of the bullhead's mouth? 5. What is the general shape of the body? What is its color? Has it any scales? 6. Why should the bullhead be so flat horizontally, while the sunfish is so flat in the opposite direction? 7. Describe the bullhead's eyes. Are they large? What is their color? Where are they placed? 8. Describe the dorsal fin, giving its comparative size and position. Do you see another dorsal fin? Where is this peculiar fin, and how does it differ from the others? 9. Describe the tail fin. Does it seem long and strong? Is the bullhead a good swimmer? 10. Is the anal fin large or small as compared with that of the goldfish? 11. How do the pectoral fins move as compared with those of the sunfish? Why is the position of the pectoral and dorsal fins of benefit to this fish? 12. How does the bullhead inflict wounds when it is handled? Tell how these spines protect it from its natural enemies. 13. When is the best season for fishing for bullheads? Does the place where they are found affect the flavor of their flesh? Why? 14. What is the spawning season? Do you know about the nests the bullheads build and the care they give their young? 15. Write an essay on the nest-making habits of the bullheads and the care given the young by the parents. And what fish will the natural boy naturally take? In America, there is but one fish which enters fully into the spirit of the occasion. It is a fish of many species according to the part of the country, and of as many sizes as there are sizes of boys. This fish is the horned pout, and all the rest of the species of Amirius. Horned pout is its Boston name. Bullhead is good enough for New York, and for the rest of the country, big and little, all the fishes of this tribe are called catfish. A catfish is a jolly, blundering sort of fish, a regular Falstaff of the ponds. It has a fat jowl and a fat belly, which it is always trying to fill. Smooth and sleek, its skin is almost human in its delicacy. It wears a long mustache, with scattering whiskers of other sort. Meanwhile, it always goes armed with a sword, 3 swords, and these it always has on hand, always ready for a struggle on land as well as in the water. The small boy often gets badly stuck on one of these poisoned daggers, but as the fish knows how to set them by a muscular twist, the small boy learns how, by a like untwist, he may unset and leave them harmless. The catfish lives in sluggish waters. It loves the mill pond best of all, and it has no foolish dread of hooks when it goes forth to bite. Its mouth is wide. It swallows the hook, and very soon it is in the air, its white throat gasping in the untried element. Soon it joins its fellows on the forked stick, and even then, uncomfortable as it may find its new relations, it never loses sight of the humor of the occasion. Its large head and expansive forehead betoken a large mind. It is the only fish whose brain contains a sylvian fissure, a piling up of tissue consequent on the abundance of gray matter. So it understands and makes no complaint. After it is dried in the sun for an hour, pour a little water over its gills, and it will wag its tail and squeak with gratitude. And the best of all is, there are horned pouts enough to go around. The female horned pout lays thousands of eggs, and when these hatch, she goes about near the shore with her school of little fishes, like a hen with myriad chicks. She should be respected and let alone, for on her success in rearing this breed of bullying little rangers depends the sport of the small boy of the future. David Starr Jordan in Fish Stories. End of section 43. Recording by Jill Engel. Fish Study. The Common Sucker. Teacher's Story. He who loves to peer down into the depths of still waters often sees upon the sandy, muddy, or rocky bottom several long, wedge-shaped sticks lying at various angles one to another. But if he thrusts down a real stick, behold, these inert, waterlogged sticks move off deftly, and then he knows that they are suckers. He may drop a hook baited with a worm in front of the nose of one, and if he waits long enough before he pulls up, he may catch this fish, not by its gills, but by the pit of its stomach, for it not only swallows the hook completely, but tries to digest it along with the worm. Its food is made up of soft-bodied insects and other small water creatures. It is also a mud-eater, and manages to make a digestive selection from the organic material of silt. For this latter reason it is not a desirable food fish, although its flesh varies in flavor with the locality where it is found. The suckers taken along the rocky shores of Cayuga Lake are fairly palatable, while those taken in the mud of the Cayuga Inlet are very inferior in flavor and often uneatable. Seen from above, the sucker is wedge-shaped, being widest at the eyes. Seen from the side, it has a flat lower surface and an ungracefully rounded contour above which tapers only slightly toward the tail. The profile of the face gives the impression of a Roman nose. The young specimens have an irregular scale mosaic pattern of olive-green blotches on a pale ground color, while the old ones are quite brown above and on the sides. The suckers differ from most other fishes in having the markings of the back extend down the sides almost to the belly. This is a help in concealing the fish, since its sides show from above quite as distinctly as its back, because of its peculiar form. The scales are rather large, and are noticeably larger behind than in the region of the head. Like other fish, it is white below. The dorsal fin is placed about midway the length of the fish, as measured from nose to tail. It is not large, and appears to have 12 rays, but there is a short spine in front, and a delicate soft ray behind, so that it really has 14. The tail is long and strong, and deeply notched. The anal fin extends back to where the tail begins. The ventral fins are small, and are directly opposite the hind half of the dorsal fin. The pectorals are not large, but are strong, and are placed low down. The sucker has not a lavish equipment of fins, but its tail is strong, and it can swim swiftly. It is also a tremendous jumper. It will jump from the aquarium more successfully than any other fish. When resting on the bottom, it is supported by its extended pectoral and ventral fins, which are strong, although not large.
The eyes are fairly large, but the iris is not shiny. They are placed so that the fish can easily see above it, as well as at the sides. The eyes move so as to look up or down, and are very well adapted to serve a fish that lives upon the bottom. The nostrils are divided, the partition projecting until it seems a tubercle on the face. The mouth opens below and looks like the puckered opening of a bag. The lips are thick, but are very sensitive. It is by projecting these lips, in a way that reminds one of a very short elephant's trunk, that it is enabled to reach and find its food in the mud or gravel. So although the sucker's mouth is not a beautiful feature, it is doubly useful. The sucker has the habit of remaining motionless for long periods of time. It breathes very slowly and appears sluggish. It never seizes its food with any spirit, but simply slowly engulfs it, and for this reason it is considered poor game. It is only in the spring, when they may be speared through the ice, that there is any fun in catching suckers. It is at this season of the year that they move to shallow water to spawn. Those in the lakes move to the rivers, those in the rivers to the creeks, those in the creeks to the brooks. Even so lowly a creature as the sucker seems to respond to the influences of the springtime, for at that period the male has a faint rosy stripe along his sides. In the winter these fish burrow in the mud of the river or pond bottoms. They may be frozen and thawed without harming them. There are many species of suckers, and they vary in size from 6 inches to 3 feet in length. They inhabit all sorts of waters, but they do not like a strong current, and are, therefore, found in still pools. The common sucker, Catastomus commersoni, which is the subject of this lesson, sometimes attains the length of 22 inches and the weight of 5 pounds. The ones under observation were about 8 inches long, and proved to be the acrobats of the aquarium, since they were likely at any moment to jump out. Several times I found one languishing on the floor. Lesson 38. The Common Sucker. Leading Thought. The sucker is especially adapted by shape for lying on the bottom of ponds under still water where its food is abundant. Method. If still water pools along river or lakesides are accessible, it is far more interesting to study a sucker in its native haunts, as an introduction to the study of its form and colors when it is in the aquarium. Observations. 1. Where do you find suckers? How do you catch them? Do they take the hook quickly? What is the natural food of the sucker? 2. What is the shape of this fish's body when seen from above? From the side? What is the color above? On the sides? Below? Does the sucker differ from most other fishes in the coloring along its sides? What is the reason for this? What do suckers look like on the bottom of the pond? Are they easily seen? 3. Describe or sketch a sucker, showing the position, size, and shape of the fins and tail. Are the scales large or small? How does it use its fin when at rest? When moving? Is it a strong swimmer? Is it a high jumper? 4. Describe the eyes. How are they especially adapted in position and in movement to the needs of a fish that lives on the bottom of streams and ponds? 5. Note the nostrils. What is there peculiar about them? 6. Where is the mouth of the sucker situated? What is its form? How is it adapted to get the food which the sucker likes best? 7. Tell all you know about the habits of the suckers. When do you see them first in the spring? Where do they spend the winter? Where do they go to spawn? How large is the largest one you have ever seen? Why is their flesh usually considered poor in quality as food? Is there a difference in the flavor of its flesh depending upon the locality in which the fish lives? Why? End of section 44. Recording by Jill Ingle.
Botsford, Comstock. Part 2. Animal Life. Chapter 2. Fish Study. The Shiner. Teacher's Story.
This is a noteworthy and characteristic lineament, or cipher, or hieroglyphic, or type of spring. You look into some clear sandy-bottomed brook, where it spreads into a deeper bay, yet flowing cold from ice and snow, not far off, and see indistinctly poised over the sand on invisible fins the outlines of the shiner, scarcely to be distinguished from the sands behind it, as if it were transparent. Thoreau. There are many species of shiners, and it is by no means easy to recognize them, nor to distinguish them from chub, dace, and minnows, since all these belong to one family. They all have the same arrangement of fins and live in the same water, and the plan of this lesson can with few changes be applied to any of them. Never were seen more exquisite colors than shimmer along the sides of the common shiner, Notropis cornutus. It is pale olive green above, just a sunny brook color. This is bordered at the sides by a line of iridescent blue-purple, while the shining silver scales on the sides below flash and glimmer with the changing hues of the rainbow. The minnows are darker than the shiners. The horned dace develops little tubercles on the head during the breeding season, which are lost later. The body of the shiner is ideal for slipping through the water. Seen from above, it is a narrow wedge, rounded in front and tapering to a point behind. From the side it is long, oval, lance-shaped. The scales are large and beautiful. The lateral line looks like a series of dots embroidered at the center of the diamond-shaped scales. The dorsal fin is placed just back of the center of the body and is not very large. It is composed of soft rays, the first two being stiff and unbranched. The tail is long, large, graceful, and deeply notched. The anal fin is almost as large as the dorsal. The ventral pair is placed on the lower side, opposite the dorsal fin. The pectorals are set at the lower margin of the body, just behind the gill openings. The shiner and its relatives use the pectoral fins to aid in swimming, and keep them constantly in motion when moving through the water. The ventrals are moved only now and then, and evidently help in keeping the balance. When the fish moves rapidly forward, the dorsal fin is raised so that its front edge stands at right angles to the body, and the ventral and anal fins are expanded to their fullest extent. But when the fish is lounging, the dorsal, anal, and ventral fins are more or less closed, although the tip of the dorsal fin swings with every movement of the fish. The eyes are large, the pupils being very large and black. The iris is pale yellow and shining. The whole eye is capable of much movement forward and back. The nostril is divided by a little projecting partition which looks like a tubercle. The mouth is at the front of the head. To see the capabilities of this mouth, watch the shiner yawn if the water of the aquarium becomes stale. Poor fellow! He yawns just as we do in the effort to get more oxygen. The shiners are essentially brook fish, although they may be found in larger bodies of water. They lead a precarious existence, for the larger fish eat them in all their stages. They only hold their own by laying countless numbers of eggs. They feed on water insects, and get even with their big fish enemies by eating their eggs. They are pretty and graceful little creatures, and may be seen swimming up the current in the middle of the brook. They often occur in schools or flocks, especially when young. Lesson 39. The Shiner. Leading Thought. The shiners are among the most common of the little fish in our small streams. They are beautiful in form and play an important part in the life of our streams. Method. Place in the aquarium shiners and as many as possible of the other species of small fish found in our creeks and brooks. The aquarium should stand where the pupil may see it often. The following questions may be asked, giving the children plenty of time for the work of observation. Observations. 1. Do you know how the shiner differs in appearance from the minnow and chub and dace? 2. What is the shape of the shiner's body when seen from above? When seen from the side? Do you think that its shape fits it for moving rapidly through the water? 3. What is the coloring above? On the sides? Below? 4. Are the scales large and distinct or very small? Can you see the lateral line? Where are the tiny holes which make this line placed in the scales? 5. Describe or sketch the fish, showing position, relative size, and shape of all the fins and the tail. 6. Describe the use and movements of each of the fins when the fish is swimming. 7. Describe the eyes. Do they move? 8. Describe the nostrils. Do you think each one is double? 9. Does the mouth open upwards, downwards, or forwards? Have you ever seen the shiner yawn? Why does it yawn? Why do you yawn? 10. Where do you find the shiners living? Do they haunt the middle of the stream or the edges? Do you ever see them in flocks or schools? Minnows. How silent comes the water round that bend. Not the minutest whisper does it send to the o'erhanging sallows. Blades of grass slowly across the checkered shadows pass. Why, you might read 2 sonnets ere they reach to where the hurrying freshnesses I preach a natural sermon over their pebbly beds, where swarms of minnows show their little heads, staying their wavy bodies gainst the streams to taste the luxury of sunny beams tempered with coolness. How they ever wrestle with their own sweet delight, and ever nestle their silver bellies on the pebbly sand. If you but scantily hold out the hand, that very instant not one will remain, but turn your eye, and there they are again. The ripples seem right glad to reach those cresses, and cool themselves among the emerald tresses, and while they cool themselves, they freshness give, and moisture, that the bowery green may live. John Keats. End of section 45. Recording by Jill Engel.
Botsford, Comstock. Part 2. Animal Life. Chapter 2. Fish Study. The Brook Trout. Teacher's Story. Up and down the brook I ran, where beneath the banks so steep lie the spotted trout asleep. Whittier. But they were probably not asleep as Mr. Whittier might have observed, if he had cast a fly near one of them. There is, in the very haunts of the trout, a suggestion of where it gets its vigor and weariness. The cold, clear streams where the water is pure, brooks that wind in and out over rocky and pebbly beds, here shaded by trees and there dashing through the open. It makes us feel vigorous even to think of such streams. Under the overhanging bank, or in the shade of some fallen log or shelving rock, the brook trout hides, where he may see all that goes on in the world above and around him, without being himself seen. Woe to the unfortunate insect that falls upon the surface of the water in his vicinity, and even that flies low over the surface, for the trout will jump easily far out of the water to seize its prey. It is this habit of taking the insect upon and above the water's surface which has made trout fly fishing the sport that it is. Man's ingenuity is fairly matched against the trout's cunning in this contest. I know of one old trout that has kept fishermen in the region around on the qui-vive for years. And up to date he is still alive, making a dash now and then at a tempting bait, showing himself enough to tantalize his would-be captors with his splendid size, but always retiring at the sight of the line. The brook trout varies much in color, depending upon the soil and the rocks of the streams in which it lives. Its back is marbled with dark olive or black, making it just the color of shaded water. This marbled coloration also marks the dorsal and the tail fins. The sides, which vary much in color, are marked with beautiful vermilion spots, each placed in the center of a larger brownish spot. In some instances the lower surface is reddish, in others whitish. All the fins on the lower side of the body have the front edges creamy or yellowish white, with a darker streak behind. The trout's head is quite large and somewhat blunt. The large eye is a little in front of the middle of the head, The dorsal fin is at about the middle of the body, and when raised is squarish in outline. Behind the dorsal fin, and near to the tail, is the little fleshy adipose fin, so called because it has no rays. The tail is fan-shaped, slightly notched at the end, and is large and strong. The anal fin is rather large, being shaped much like the dorsal fin, only slightly smaller. The ventral fins are directly below the dorsal fin, and a little behind its middle. The pectorals are low down, being below and just behind the gill arches. In size, the brook trout seldom is longer than 7 or 8 inches, but in the rivers of the northeastern United States, specimens weighing from 6 to 11 pounds are sometimes taken. It does not flourish in water which is warmer than 68 degrees, but prefers a temperature of about 50 degrees. It must have the pure water of mountain streams, and cannot endure water of rivers which is polluted by mills or the refuse of cities. Where it has access to streams that flow into the ocean, it forms the saltwater habit, going out to sea and remaining there during the winter. Such specimens become very large. The trout can lay eggs when about 6 inches in length. The eggs are laid from September until late November, although, as Mr. Breen says, the brook trout are spawned at some locality in almost every month of the year except midsummer. One mother trout lays from 400 to 600 eggs, but the large-sized ones lay more. The period of hatching depends upon the temperature of the water. In depositing their eggs, the trout seek water with a gravelly bottom, often where some mountain brook opens into a larger stream. The nest is shaped by the tail of the fish, the larger stones being carried away in the mouth. To make the precious eggs secure, they are covered with gravel. There have been strict laws enacted by almost all of our states with a view to protecting the brook trout and preserving it in our streams. The open season in New York is from the 15th of April to the 1st of September, and it is illegal to take from a stream a fish that is less than 5 inches in length. It is the duty of every decent citizen to abide by these laws and to see to it that his neighbors observe them. The teacher cannot emphasize enough upon the child the moral value of being law-abiding. There should be in every school in the Union children's clubs which should have for their purpose civic honesty and the enforcement of laws which affect the city, village, or township. Almost any stream with suitable waters may be stocked with trout from the national or the state hatcheries. But what is the use of this expense if the game laws are not observed, and these fish are caught before they reach maturity, as is so often the case? Lesson 40. The Brook Trout. Leading Thought. The brook trout have been exterminated in our streams, largely because the game laws have not been observed. The trout is the most cunning and beautiful of our common fishes, and the most valuable for food. If properly guarded, every pure mountain stream in our country could be well stocked with the brook trout. Method. A trout may be kept in an aquarium of flowing water indefinitely, and should be fed upon liver and hard clams chopped. If there is no aquarium with running water, the trout may be kept in an ordinary jar long enough for this lesson. The object of this lesson should be not only the study of the habits of the fish, but also a lesson in its preservation. Observations. 1. In what streams are the brook trout found? Must the water be warm or cold? Can the trout live in impure water? Can it live in salt water? 2. Do the trout swim about in schools, or do they live solitary? Where do they like to hide? 3. With what kind of bait is trout caught? Why does it afford such excellent sport for fly fishing? Can you tell what the food of the trout is? 4. What is the color of the trout above? What colors along its sides? What markings make the fish so beautiful? What is its color below? Has the trout scales? Do you see the lateral line? 5. What is the general shape of the brook trout? Describe the shape, position, and color of the dorsal fin. Describe the little fin behind the dorsal. Why is it unlike the other fins? What is the shape of the tail fin? Is it round, square or crescent-shaped across the end? What is the position and size of the anal fin compared with the dorsal? What colors on the ventral fins, and where are they placed in relation to the dorsal fin? What colors are the pectoral fins, and how are they placed in relation to the gill arches? 6. Describe the trout's eyes. Are they large and alert? Do you think the trout is keen-sighted? 7. When and where are the eggs laid? Describe how the nest is made. How are the eggs covered and protected? 8. Why are there no trout in the streams of your neighborhood? Could a trout live in those streams? Can you get state aid in stocking the streams? 9. What are the game laws concerning trout fishing? When is the open season? How long must the trout be to be taken legally? If you are a good citizen, what do you do about the game laws? 10. Write a story telling all you know about the wariness, cunning, and strength of the brook trout. Trout. It is well for anglers not to make trout, of all fishes, the prime objective of a day's sport, as no more uncertain game loves the sunlight. Today he is yours for the very asking. Tomorrow the most luscious lure will not tempt him. 1 hour he defies you. The next gazes at you from some ensconcement of the fishes, and knows you not as you pass him, casting by. I believe I accumulated some of this angling wisdom years ago in a certain trout domain in New England, where there were streams and pools, ripples, cascades, and drooping trees, where everything was fair and promising to the eyes for trout. But it required superhuman patience to lure them, and many a day I scored a blank. Yet on these very days when the lures were unavailing, the creel empty save for the fern leaves, I found they were not for naught, that the real fishing day was a composite of the weather, the wind, even if it was from the east, the splendid color of the forest trees, the blue tourmaline of the sky that topped the stream amid the trees, the flecks of cloud mirrored on the surface, the delight of anticipation, the casting, the play of the rod, the exercise of skill, the quick turns in the stream opening up new vistas, the little openings in the forest, through which were seen distant meadows and nodding flowers. All these went to make up the real trout fishing, the actual catch being but an incident among many delights. Just how long one could be content with mere scenery in lieu of trout, I am not prepared to say. If pushed to the wall, I confess that when fishing, I prefer trout to scenic effects. Still, it is a very impractical and delightful sentiment, with some truth to it, the moral being that the angler should be resourceful, and not be entirely cast down on the days when the wind is in the cast. I am aware that this method of angling is not in vogue with some, and would be deemed fanciful, indeed inane, by many more. Yet it is based upon a true and homely philosophy, not of today, the philosophy of patience and contentment. "How poor are they that have not patience," said Othello. It is well to be content with things as we find them, and it is well to go a-fishing, not to catch fish alone, but every offering the day has to give. This should be an easy matter for the angler, as Walton tells us, that angling is somewhat like poetry. Men are to be born so. Fish Stories, Jordan and Holder. End of section 46. Recording by Jill Ingle. Handbook of Nature Study by Anna Botsford Comstock. Part 2. Animal Life. Chapter 2. Fish Study. The Stickleback. Teacher's Story. This is certainly the most sagacious of the Lilliputian vertebrates. Scarcely more than an inch in length when full grown, it gazes at you with large, keen, shining rimmed eyes, takes your measure, and darts off with a flirt of the tail that says plainly, "Catch me if you can." The sticklebacks are delightful aquarium pets, because their natural home is in still water, sufficiently stagnant for algae to grow luxuriously. Thus we but seldom need to change the water in the aquarium, which, however, should be well stocked with water plants and have gravel at the bottom. When the stickleback is not resting, he is always going somewhere,
and he knows just where he is going and what he is going to do, and earthquakes shall not deter him. He is the most dynamic creature in all creation, I think, except perhaps the dragonfly, and he is so ferocious that if he were as large as a shark, he would destroy all other fishes. Place an earthworm, cut into small sections, in the aquarium, and while each section is wrigglingly considering whether it may be able to grow both ends into another worm, the stickleback takes hold with a will and settles the matter in the negative. His ferocity is frightful to behold as he seizes his prey and shakes it as a terrier does a rat. Well is this fish named stickleback, for along the ridge of its back are sharp, strong spines, 5 of them in our tiny brook species. These spines may be laid back flat, or they may be erected stiffly, making an efficient saw which does great damage to fish many times larger than the stickleback. When we find minnows in the aquarium losing their scales, we may be sure they are being raked off by this sawback. And if the shiner or sunfish undertakes to make a stickleback meal, there is only one way to do it, and that is to catch the quarry by the tail, since he is too alert to be caught in any other way. But swallowing a stickleback tail first is a dangerous performance, for the sharp spines rip open the throat or stomach of the captor. Dr. Jordan says that the sticklebacks of the Puget Sound region are called salmon killers, and that they well earn the name. These fierce midgets unhesitatingly attack the salmon, biting off pieces of their fins and also destroying their spawn. As seen from the side, the stickleback is slender and graceful, pointed like an arrow at the front end, and with the body behind the dorsal fin, forming a long and slender pedicel to support the beautifully rounded tail fin. The dorsal fin is placed well back and is triangular in shape. The anal fin makes a similar triangle opposite it below and has a sharp spine at its front edge. The color of the body varies with the light. When floating among the waterweed, the back is greenish, mottled with paler green, but when the fish is down on the gravel it is much darker. The lateral line is marked by a rather broad silver stripe. If large eyes count for beauty, then the stickleback deserves the apple, for its eyes are not only large, but gem-like, with a broad iris of golden brown around the black pupil. I am convinced that the stickleback has a keener vision than most fish. It can move its eyes backward and forward rapidly and alertly. The mouth opens upward and is a wicked little mouth, both in appearance and action. When swimming, the stickleback darts about rapidly, its dorsal and anal fins extended, its spines all abristle, its tail lashing the water with strong strokes, and the pectorals flying so fast that they make a blur. The ventral fins are rarely extended. In fact, they are nothing but 2 little spines. When the fish wishes to lift itself through the water, it seems to depend entirely upon its pectoral fins, and these are also used for balancing. Its favorite position is hanging motionless among the pondweeds, with the tail, the dorsal, and ventral fins partially closed. It usually rests upon the pectoral fins, which are braced against some stem. In one case, I saw the ventrals and pectorals used together to clasp a stem and hold the fish in place. In moving backward, the pectorals do the work, with a little beckoning motion of the tail occasionally. When resting upon the bottom of the aquarium, it closes its fins and makes itself quite inconspicuous. It can dig with much power, accomplishing this by a comical auger-like motion. It plunges its head first into the gravel, and then by twisting the body and tail around and around, it soon forms a hiding place. But it is as a house builder and father and home protector that the stickleback shines. In the early spring he builds himself a nest, made from the fine green algae called frog spittle. This would seem a delicate material for the house construction, but he is a clever builder. He fastens his filmy walls to some stems of reed or grass, using as a platform a supporting stem. The ones which I have especially studied were fastened to grass stems. The stickleback has a little cement plant of his own, supposed to be situated in the kidneys, which at this time of the year secrete the glue for building purposes. The glue is waterproof. It is spun out in fine threads, or in filmy masses, through an opening near the anal fin. One species weights his platform with sand which he scoops up from the bottom, but I cannot detect that our brook stickleback does this. In his case, home is his sphere, literally, for he builds a spherical house about the size of a glass marble.
3/4 of an inch in diameter. It is a hollow sphere, and he cements the inside walls so as to hold them back and give room. And he finishes his pretty structure with a circular door at the side. When finished, the nest is like a bubble made of threads of down, and yet it holds together strongly. In the case of the best known species, the male, as soon as he has finished his bower to his satisfaction, goes a-wooing. He selects some lady stickleback, and in his own way tells her of the beautiful nest he has made, and convinces her of his ability to take care of a family. He certainly has fetching ways, for he soon conducts her to his home. She enters the nest through the little circular door, lays her eggs within it, and then, being a flighty creature, she sheds responsibilities and flits off carefree. He follows her into the nest, scatters the fertilizing milt over the eggs, and then starts off again, and rolls his golden eyes over some other lady stickleback, and invites her also to his home. She comes without any jealousy because she was not the first choice. And she also enters the nest and lays her eggs, and then swims off unconcernedly. Again he enters the nest and drops more milt upon the eggs, and then fares forth again, a still energetic wooer. If there was ever a justified polygamist, he is one, since it is only the cares and responsibilities of the home that he desires. He only stops wooing when his nest holds as many eggs as he feels equal to caring for. He now stands on guard by the door, and with his winnowing pectoral fins sets up a current of water over the eggs. He drives off all intruders with the most vicious attacks, and keeps off many an enemy simply by a display of reckless fury. Thus he stands guard until the eggs hatch, and the tiny little sticklebacks come out of the nest and float off, attaching themselves by their mouths to the pond weeds until they become strong enough to scurry around in the water. Some species arrange 2 doors in this spherical nest, so that a current of water can flow through and over the eggs. Mr. Eugene Barker, who has made a special study of the little 5-spined sticklebacks of the Cayuga Basin, has failed to find more than 1 door to their nests. Mr. Barker made a most interesting observation on this stickleback's obsession for fatherhood. He placed in the aquarium 2 nests, one of which was guarded by its loyal builder, which allowed himself to be caught rather than desert his post. The little guardian soon discovered the unprotected nest, and began to move the eggs from it to his own, carrying them in his mouth. This addition made his own nest so full that the eggs persistently crowded out of the door, and he spent much of his time nudging them back with his snout. We saw this stickleback fill his mouth with algae from the bottom of the aquarium, and, holding himself steady a short distance away, apparently blow the algae at the nest from a distance of half an inch, and we wondered if this was his method of laying on his building material before he cemented them. The eggs of this species are white and shining like minute pearls, and seem to be fastened together in small packages with gelatinous matter. The mating habits of this species have not been thoroughly studied. Therefore, here is an opportunity for investigation on the part of the boys and girls. Lesson 41. The Stickleback. Leading Thought. The stickleback is the smallest of our common fish. It lives in stagnant water. The father stickleback builds his nest of frog spittle, which he watches very carefully. Method. To find sticklebacks, go to a pond of stagnant water, which does not dry up during the year. If it is partly shaded by bushes, so much the better. Take a dip net and dip deeply. Carefully examine all the little fish in the net by putting them in a mason jar of water, so that you can see what they are like. The stickleback is easily distinguished by the 5 spines along its back. If you collect these fish as early as the 1st of May, and place several of them in the aquarium with plenty of the algae known as frog spittle and other water plants, they may perhaps build a nest for you. They may be fed upon bits of meat or liver chopped very fine, or upon earthworms cut into small sections. Observations. 1. How did the stickleback get its name? How many spines has it? Where are they situated? Are they always carried erect? How are these spines used as weapons? How do they act as a means of safety to the stickleback? 2. Describe or make a sketch showing the shape and position of the dorsal, the anal, the ventral, and the pectoral fins. What is the shape of the tail? What is the general shape of the fish? 3.
What is the color of the sticklebacks? Is the color always the same? What is the color and position of the lateral line? 4. Describe the eyes. Are they large or small? Can they be moved? Do you think they can see far? 5. Describe the mouth. Does it open upward, straight ahead, or downward? 6. When the stickleback is swimming, what are the positions and motions of the dorsal, anal, tail, and pectoral fins? Can you see the ventral pair? Are they extended when the fish is swimming? 7. When resting among the pondweed of the aquarium, what fins does a stickleback use for keeping afloat? How are the other fins held? What fins does it use to move backward? Which ones are used when it lifts itself from the bottom to the top of the aquarium? How are its fins placed when it is at rest on the bottom? 8. Drop a piece of earthworm or some liver or fresh meat, cut finely, into the aquarium and describe the action of the sticklebacks as they eat it. How large is a full-grown stickleback? 9. In what kind of ponds do we find sticklebacks? Do you know how the stickleback nest looks? Of what it is built? How is it supported? Is there one door or two? Does the father or mother stickleback build the nest? Are the young in the nest cared for? At what time is the nest built? End of section 47. Recording by Jill Engel. The Sunfish, Teacher's Story. This little disc of gay color has won many popular names. It is called pumpkin seed, tobacco box, and sunfish because of its shape, and it is also called bream and pondfish. I've always wondered that it was not called chieftain also, for when it raises its dorsal fin with its saw crest of spines, it looks like the headdress of an Indian chief. And surely no warrior ever had a greater enjoyment in a battle than does this indomitable little fish. The sunfish lives in the eddies of our clear brooks and ponds. It is a near relative to the rock bass and also of the black bass, and it has, according to its size, just as gamey qualities as the latter. I once had a sunfish on my line, which made me think I had caught a bass, and I do not know whether I or the mad little pumpkin seed was the more disgusted when I discovered the truth. I threw him back in the water, but his fighting spirit was up, and he grabbed my hook again within 5 minutes, which showed that he had more courage than wisdom. It would have served him right if I had fried him in a pan, but I never could make up my mind to kill a fish for the sake of one mouthful of food. Perhaps of all its names, pumpkin seed is the most graphic, for it resembles this seed in the outlines of its body when seen from the side. Looked at from above, it has the shape of a powerful craft with smooth rounded nose and gently swelling and tapering sides. It is widest at the eyes, and this is a canny arrangement, for these great eyes turn alertly in every direction, and thus placed they are able to discern the enemy or the dinner coming from any quarter. The dorsal fin is the most militant-looking organ. It consists of 10 spines, the hind one closely joined to the hind dorsal fin, which is supported by the soft rays. The 3 front spines rise successively, one above another, and all are united by the membrane, the upper edge of which is deeply toothed. The hind dorsal fin is gracefully rounded, and the front and hind fin work independently of each other, the latter often winnowing the water when the former is laid flat. The tail is strong and has a notch in the end. The anal fin has 3 spines on its front edge and 10 soft rays. Each ventral fin also has a spine at the front edge and is placed below and slightly behind the pectorals. The pectoral fins, I have often thought, were the most exquisite and gauze-like in texture of any fins I have ever seen. They are kept almost constantly in motion, and move in such graceful flowing undulations that it is a joy to look at them. The eye of the sunfish is very large and quite prominent. The large black pupil is surrounded by an iris that has shining lavender and bronze in it, but is more or less clouded above. The young ones have a pale silver iris. The eyes move in every direction and are eager and alert in their expression. The mouth is at the front of the body, but it opens upward. The gill opening is prolonged backward at the upper corner, making an ear-like flap. This, of course, has nothing to do with the fish's ears, but it is highly ornamental, as it is greenish-black in color, bordered by iridescent pale green, with a bright orange spot on its hind edge. The colors of the sunfish are too varied for description, and too beautiful to reduce to mere words. There are dark, dull, greenish or purplish cross bands worked out in patterns of scale mosaic, and between them are bands of pale iridescent green, set with black-edged orange spots. But just as we have described his colors, our sunfish darts off, and all sorts of shimmering, shining blue, green, and purple tints play over his body as he settles down into another corner of the aquarium, and his colors seem much paler, and we have to describe him over again. The body below is brassy yellow. The beautiful colors which the male sunfish dons in spring he puts at once to practical use. Professor Reihard says that when courting and trying to persuade his chosen one to come to his nest and there deposit her eggs, he faces her, with his gill covers puffed out, the scarlet or orange spot on the ear flap standing out bravely, and his black ventral fins spread wide to show off their patent leather finish. Thus does he display himself before her and persuade her, but he is rarely allowed to do this in peace. Other males as brilliant as he arrive on the scene, and he must forsooth stop parading before his lady-love in order to fight his rival, and he fights with as much display of color as he courts. But in the sunfish duel, the participants do not seek to destroy each other, but to mutilate spitefully each other's fins. The vanquished one, with his fins all torn, retires from the field. Professor Gill says, "Meanwhile the male has selected a spot in very shallow water near the shore, and generally in a mass of aquatic vegetation, not too large or close together to entirely exclude the light and heat of the sun, and mostly under an overhanging plant. The choice is apt to be in some general strip of shallow water close by the shore, which is favored by many others, so that a number of similar nests may be found close together, although never encroaching on each other. Each fish slightly excavates and makes a saucer-like basin in the chosen area, which is carefully cleared of all pebbles. Such are removed by violent jerks of the caudal fin, or are taken up by the mouth and carried to the circular boundary of the nest. An area of fine, clean sand or gravel is generally the result, but not infrequently, according to Dr. Reihard, the nest bottom is composed of the rootlets of water plants. The nest has a diameter of about twice the length of the fish. On the nest thus formed, the sunfish belle is invited to deposit her eggs, which as soon as laid fall to the bottom and become attached to the gravel at the bottom of the nest by the viscid substance which surrounds them. Her duty is then done, and she departs, leaving the master in charge of his home and the eggs. If truth be told, he is not a strict monogamist. Professor Reihard noticed one of these males which reared in one nest 2 broods laid at quite different times by 2 females. For about a week, depending upon the temperature, the male is absorbed in his care of the eggs, and defends his nest with much ferocity. But after the eggs have hatched, he considers his duty done, and lets his progeny take care of themselves as best they may. Sunfish are easily taken care of in an aquarium, but each should be kept by himself, as they are likely to attack any smaller fish, and are most uncomfortable neighbors. I have kept one of these beautiful shimmering pumpkin seeds for nearly a year, by feeding him every alternate day with an earthworm. These unfortunate creatures are stored in damp soil and an iron kettle during the winter. When I throw one of them into the aquarium, he would seize it and shake it as a terrier shakes a rat, but this was perhaps to make sure of his hold. Once he attempted to take the second worm directly after the first, but it was a doubtful proceeding, and the worm reappeared as often as a prima donna, waving each time a frenzied farewell to the world. Lesson 41. The Sunfish. Leading thought. The pumpkin seeds are very gamey little fishes, which seize the hook with much fierceness. They live in the still waters of our streams or in ponds, and build nests in the spring, in which the eggs are laid, and which they defend valiantly. Method. The common pumpkin seed and the jar aquarium is all that is necessary for this lesson. However, it will add much to the interest of the lesson if the boys who have fished for pumpkin seeds will tell of their experiences. The children should be stimulated by this lesson to a keen interest in the nesting habits of sunfishes. Observations. 1. Where are the sunfish found? How do they act when they take the hook? 2. What is the general shape of the sunfish's body as seen from above? As seen from the side? Why is it called pumpkin seed? 3. Describe the dorsal fin. How many spines has it? How many soft rays? What is the difference in appearance between the front and hind dorsal fins? Do the two act together or separately? Describe the tail fin. Describe the anal fin. Has it any spines? If so, where are they? Where are the ventral fins in relation to the pectorals? What is there peculiar about the appearance and movements of the pectoral fins? 4. Describe the eye of the sunfish. Is it large or small? Is it placed so that the fish can see on each side? Does the eye move in all directions? 5. Describe the position of the mouth. In which direction does it open? 6. What is the color of the upper portion of the gill opening or operculum? What is the general color of the sunfish? Above? Below? Along the sides? What markings do you see? 7. Where does the sunfish make its nest? Does the father or mother sunfish make the nest? Do one or both protect it? Describe the nest. 8. How many names do you know for the sunfish? Describe the actions of your sunfish in the aquarium. How does he act when eating an earthworm? The lamprey is not a fish at all, only a wicked imitation of one, which can deceive nobody. But there are fishes which are unquestionably fish, fish from gills to tail, from head to fin, and of these the little sunfish may stand first. He comes up the brook in the spring, fresh as coin just from the mint, finny arms and legs wide spread, his gills moving, his mouth opening and shutting rhythmically, his tail wide spread and ready for any sudden motion for which his erratic little brain may give the order. The scales of the sunfish shine with all sorts of scarlet, blue, green, and purple and golden colors. There's a black spot on his head which looks like an ear, and sometimes grows out in a long black flap, which makes the imitation still closer. There are many species of the sunfish, and there may be half a dozen of them in the same brook, but that makes no difference. For our purposes they are all one. They lie poised in the water with all fins spread, strutting like turkey cocks, snapping at worms and little crustaceans and insects, whose only business in the brook is that the fishes may eat them. When the time comes, the sunfish makes its nest in the fine gravel, building it with some care, for a fish. When the female has laid her eggs, the male stands guard until the eggs are hatched. His sharp teeth and snappish ways, and the bigness of his appearance when the fins are all displayed, keep the little fishes away. Sometimes in his zeal he snaps at a hook baited with a worm. He then makes a fierce fight, and the boy who holds the rod is sure that he has a real fish this time. But when the sunfish is out of the water, strung on a willow rod and dried in the sun, the boy sees that a very little fish can make a good deal of a fuss. David Starr Jordan. End of section 48.
Nature Study by Anna Botsford Comstock. Part 2. Animal Life. Chapter 2. Fish Study. The Johnny Darter. Teacher's Story. We never tired of watching the little Johnny, or tessellated darter, Buliosma nigrum, although our earliest aquarium friend, and the very first specimens showed us by a rapid ascent of the river weed how a Johnny could climb trees. He has still many resources which we have never learned. Whenever we try to catch him with the hand, we begin with all the uncertainty that characterized our first attempts, even if we have him in a 2-quart pail. We may know him by his short fins, his first dorsal having but 9 spines, and by the absence of all color save a soft yellowish brown, which is freckled with darker markings. The dark brown on the sides is arranged in 7 or 8 W-shaped marks, below which are a few flecks of the same color. Covering the sides of the back are the wavy markings and dark specks which have given the name of the tessellated darter. But Boliosoma is a preferred name, and we even prefer Boli for short. In the spring, the males have the head jet black, and this dark color often extends on the back part of the body, so that the fish looks as if he had been taken by the tail and dipped into a bottle of ink. But with the end of the nuptial season, this color disappears, and the fish regains his normal strawy hue. His actions are rather bird-like, for he will strike attitudes like a tufted titmouse, and he flies rather than swims through the water. He will, with much perseverance, push his body between a plant and the sides of the aquarium and balance himself on a slender stem. Crouching cat-like before a snail shell, he will snap off a horn, which the unlucky owner pushes timidly out. But he is also less dainty, and seizing the animal by the head, he dashes the shell against the glass or stones until he pulls the body out and breaks the shell. David Starr Jordan. The Johnny Darters are, with the sticklebacks, the most amusing little fish in the aquarium. They are well called darters, since their movements are so rapid when they are frightened that the eye can scarcely follow them. And there is something so irresistibly comical in their bright, saucy eyes, placed almost on top of the head, that no one could help calling one of them Johnny. A Johnny will look at you from one side, and then, as quick as a flash, will flounce around and study you with the other eye, and then come toward you head-on, so that he may take you in with both eyes. He seems just as interested in the Johnny out of the jar, as is the latter in the Johnny within. The Johnny Darter has a queer-shaped body for a fish, for the head and shoulders are the larger part of him. Not that he suddenly disappears into nothingness, by no means. His body is long and very slightly tapered to the tail. Along his lateral line he has a row of olive-brown W's worked out in scale mosaics, and he has some other scale mosaics also following a pattern of angular lines and making blotches along his back. The whole upper part of his body is pale olive, which is a good imitation of the color of the brook. The astonished and anxious look on the Johnny Darter's face comes from the peculiar position of the eyes, which are set in the top of his forehead. They are big, alert eyes, with large black pupils, surrounded by a shining, pale yellow line at the inner edge of the green iris. And as the pupil is not set in the center of the eye, the iris above being wider than below, the result is an astonished look, as from raised eyebrows. The eyes move, often so swiftly that it gives the impression of winking. The eyes, the short snout, and the wide mouth give Johnny a decidedly frog-like aspect. Although he is no frog, yet Johnny Darter seems to be in a fair way to develop something to walk upon. His pectoral fins are large and strong, and the ventral pair are situated very close to them. When he rests upon the gravel, he supports himself upon one or both of these pairs of fins. He rests with the pectoral fins outspread, the sharp points of the rays taking hold of the gravel like toenails, and thus give him the appearance of walking on his fins. If you poke him gently, you will find that he is very firmly planted on his fins, so that you can turn him around as if he were on a pivot. He also uses the pectorals for swimming and jerks himself along with them in a way that makes one wonder if he could not swim well without any tail at all. The tail is large and almost straight across the end, and is a most vigorous pusher. There are 2 dorsal fins. The front one has only 9 rays. These are not branched, and are therefore spines. When the fin is raised, it appears almost semicircular in shape. The hind dorsal fin is much longer, and when lifted stands higher than the front one. Its rays are all branched except the front one. As soon as the Johnny stops swimming, he shuts the front dorsal fin, so that it can scarcely be detected. When frightened, he shuts both the dorsal fins, and closes the tail and the anal fin, and spreads out his paired fins, so that his body lies flat on the bottom. This act always reminds one of the freezing habit of the rabbit. But Johnny does not stay scared very long. He lifts his head up inquisitively, stretching up as far as he is able on his front feet, that is, his pectorals, in such a comical way that one can hardly realize he's a fish. The tail and the dorsal fin of the Johnny Darter are marked with silver dots which give them an exquisite spun glass look. They are as transparent as gauze.
The Johnny Darters live in clear, swift streams, where they rest on the bottom with the head upstream. Dr. Jordan has said they can climb up waterweed with their paired fins. I have never observed them doing this, but I have often seen one walk around the aquarium on his fins, as if they were little fan-shaped feet, and when swimming he uses his fins as a bird uses its wings. There are many species of darters, some of them the most brilliantly colored of any of our freshwater fishes. The darters are perch-like in form. Dr. Jordan says of the breeding habits of the darters, "On the bottom among the stones the female casts her spawn. Neither she nor the male pays any further attention to it. But in the breeding season the male is painted in colors as beautiful as those of the wood warblers. When you go to the brook in the spring you will find him there, and if you catch him and turn him over on his side, you will see the colors that he shows to his mate, and which observation shows are most useful in frightening away his younger rivals. But do not hurt him. Put him back in the brook, and let him paint its bottom with colors of a rainbow, a sunset, or a garden of roses. All that can be done with blue, crimson, and green pigments in fish ornamentation you will find in some brook in which the darters live." Lesson 42. Johnny Darter. Leading thought. The Johnny Darter naturally rests upon the bottom of the stream where the current is swift. It uses its two pairs of paired fins somewhat as feet in a way interesting to observe. Method. Johnny Darters may be caught in nets with other small fry and placed in the aquarium. Place one or two of them in individual aquaria, where the pupils may observe them at their leisure. They do best in running water. Observations. 1. Describe or sketch the Johnny Darter from above. From the side. Can you see the W-shaped marks along its side? How is it colored above? 2. How are the pectoral fins placed? Are they large or small? How are they used in swimming? Where are the ventral fins placed? How are the ventrals and dorsals used together? When resting on the bottom, how are the pectoral fins used? 3. What is there peculiar about the dorsal fins of the Johnny Darter? When he is resting, what is the attitude of the dorsal fins? What is the difference in shape of the rays of the front and hind dorsal fins? 4. When resting on the bottom of the aquarium, how is the body held? On what does it rest? In moving about the bottom slowly, why does it seem to walk? How does it climb up waterweed? 5. When frightened, how does it act? Why is it called a darter? What is the attitude of all the fins when the fish is moving swiftly? 6. What is the shape of the tail? 7. What is there peculiar about the eyes of the Johnny? Describe the eyes and their position. What reason is there in the life of the fish that makes this position of the eyes advantageous? 8. Where do we find the Johnny Darters? In what part of the stream do they live? Are they usually near the surface of the water or at the bottom? To my mind, the best of all subjects for nature study is a brook. It affords studies of many kinds. It is near and dear to every child. It is an epitome of the nature in which we live. In miniature, it illustrates the forces which have shaped much of the earth's surface. It reflects the sky. It is kissed by the sun. It is rippled by the wind. The minnows play in the pools. The soft weeds grow in the shallows. The grass and dandelions lie on its sunny banks. The moss and fern are sheltered in the nooks. It comes from one knows not whence. It flows to one knows not whither. It awakens a desire to explore. It is fraught with mysteries. It typifies the flood of life. It goes on forever. In other words, the reason why the brook is such a perfect nature study subject is the fact that it is the central theme in a scene of life. Living things appeal to children. Nature study not only educates, but it educates nature-ward, and nature is ever our companion, whether we will or no. Even though we are determined to shut ourselves in an office, nature sends her messengers. The light, the dark, the moon, the cloud, the rain, the wind, the falling leaf, the fly, the bouquet, the bird, the cockroach, They are all ours. If one is to be happy, he must be in sympathy with common things. He must live in harmony with his environment. One cannot be happy yonder nor tomorrow. He is happy here and now, or never. Our stock of knowledge of common things should be great. Few of us can travel. We must know the things at home. Nature love tends toward naturalness and toward simplicity of living. It tends countryward. One word from the fields is worth two from the city. God made the country. I expect, therefore, that much good will come from nature study. It ought to revolutionize the school life, for it is capable of putting new force and enthusiasm into the school and the child. It is new and therefore is called a fad. A movement is a fad until it succeeds. We shall learn much and shall outgrow some of our present notions, but nature study has come to stay. It is in much the same stage of development that manual training and kindergarten work were 25 years ago. We must take care that it does not crystallize into science teaching on the one hand, nor fall into mere sentimentalism on the other. I would again emphasize the importance of obtaining our fact before we let loose the imagination, for on this point we will largely turn the results, the failure or the success of the experiment. We must not allow our fancy to run away with us. If we hitch our wagon to a star, we must ride with mind and soul and body all alert. When we ride in such a wagon, we must not forget to put in the tailboard. L. H. Bailey in The Nature Study Idea. End of section 49. End of chapter 2. Recording by Jill Ingle. The Common Toad. Teacher's Story. The toad hopped by us with jolting springs. Acres. Whoever has not had a pet toad has missed a most entertaining experience. Toad actions are surprisingly interesting. One of my favorite safeguards against the blues is the memory of the thoughtful way one of my pet toads rubbed and patted its stomach with its little hands after it had swallowed a June bug. Toads do not make warts upon attacking hands, neither do they rain down, nor are they found in the bedrock of quarries. But they do have a most interesting history of their own, which is not at all legendary, and which is very like a life with two incarnations. The mother toad lays her eggs in May and June in ponds, or in the still pools along streams. The eggs are laid in long strings of jelly-like substance, and are dropped upon the pond bottom, or attached to water weeds. When first deposited, the jelly is transparent, and the little black eggs can be plainly seen. But after a day or two, bits of dirt accumulate upon the jelly, obscuring the eggs. At first the eggs are spherical, like tiny black pills, but as they begin to develop, they elongate, and finally the tadpoles may be seen wriggling in the jelly mass, which affords them efficient protection. After 4 or 5 days, the tadpoles usually work their way out and swim away. At this stage, the only way to detect the head is by the direction of the tadpole's progress, since it naturally goes head first. However, the head soon becomes decidedly larger, although at first it is not provided with a mouth. It has instead a V-shaped elevation where the mouth should be, which forms a sucker secreting a sticky substance by means of which the tadpole attaches itself to water weeds, resting head up. When 2 or 3 days old, we can detect little tassels on either side of the throat, which are the gills by which the little creature breathes. The blood passes through these gills and is purified by coming in contact with the air which is mixed in the water. About 10 days later, these gills disappear beneath a membrane which grows down over them, but they are still used for breathing, simply having changed position from the outside to the inside of the throat. The water enters the nostrils to the mouth, passes through an opening in the throat, and flows over the gills and out through a little opening at the left side of the body. This opening or breathing pore can be easily seen in the larger tadpoles, and when the left arm develops, it is pushed out through this convenient orifice. When about 10 days old, the tadpole has developed a small round mouth, which is constantly in search of something to eat.
and at the same time constantly opening and shutting to take in air for the gills. The mouth is provided with horny jaws for biting off pieces of plants. As the tadpole develops, its mouth gets larger and wider and extends back beneath the eyes, with a truly toad-like expansiveness. At first, the tadpole's eyes are even with the surface of the head and can scarcely be seen, but later they become more prominent and bulge like the eyes of the adult toad. The tail of the tadpole is long and flat, surrounded by a fin, thus making an organ for swimming. It strikes the water, first this side and then that, making most graceful curves, which seem to originate near the body and multiply toward the tip of the tail. This movement propels the tadpole forward, or in any direction. The tail is very thin when seen from above, and it is amusing to look at the tadpole from above, and then at the side. It is like squaring a circle. There is a superstition that the tadpoles eat their tails, and in a sense this is true, because the material that is in the tail is absorbed into the growing body. But the last thing a right-minded tadpole would do would be to bite off its own tail. However, if some other tadpole should bite off the tail or a growing leg, these organs conveniently grow anew. When the tadpole is a month or two old, depending upon the species, its hind legs begin to show. They first appear as mere buds which finally push out completely. The feet are long and provided with 5 toes, of which the 4th is the longest. The toes are webbed so that they may be used to help in swimming. 2 weeks later, the arms begin to appear, the left one pushing out through the breathing pore. The hands have 4 fingers and are not webbed. They are used in the water for balancing, while the hind legs are used for pushing, as the tail becomes smaller. As the tadpole grows older, not only does its tail become shorter, but its actions change. It now comes often to the surface of the water in order to get more air for its gills, although it lacks the frog tadpole's nice adjustment of the growing lungs and the disappearing gills. At last, some fine rainy day, the little creature feels that it is finally fitted to live the life of a land animal. It may not be a half-inch in length, with a big head, attenuated body, and stumpy tail, but it swims to the shore, lifts itself on its front legs, which are scarcely larger than pins, and walks off, toeing in, with a very grown-up air, and at this moment the tadpole attains toadship. Numbers of them come out of the water together, hopping hither and thither with all of the eagerness and vim of untried youth. It is when issuing thus in hordes from the water and seen by the ignorant that they gain the reputation of being rained down, when they really were rained up. It is quite impossible for a beginner to detect the difference between the toad and the frog tadpole. Usually those of the toads are black, while those of the frogs are otherwise colored, though this is not an invariable distinction. The best way to distinguish the two is to get the eggs and develop the 2 families separately. The general color of the common American toad is extremely variable. It may be yellowish-brown with spots of lighter color and with reddish or yellow warts. There are likely to be 4 irregular spots of dark color along each side of the middle of the back, and the underparts are light-colored, often somewhat spotted. The throat of the male toad is black, and he is not so bright in color as is the female. The warts upon the back are glands, which secrete a substance disagreeable for the animal seeking toad dinners. This is especially true of the glands in the elongated swelling or wart above and just back of the ear, which is called the parotid gland. These give forth a milky, poisonous substance when the toad is seized by an enemy, although the snakes do not seem to mind it. Some people have an idea that the toad is slimy, but this is not true. The skin is perfectly dry. The toad feels cold to the hand because it is a cold-blooded animal, which means an animal with blood the temperature of the surrounding atmosphere, while the blood of the warm-blooded animal has a temperature of its own, which it maintains whether the surrounding air is cold or hot. The toad's face is well worth study. Its eyes are elevated and very pretty, the pupil being oval and the surrounding iris shining like gold.
The toad winks in a wholesale fashion, the eyes being pulled down into the head. The eyes are provided with nictitating lids which rise from below and are similar to those found in birds. When a toad is sleeping, its eyes do not bulge but are drawn in, so as to lie even with the surface of the head. The two tiny nostrils are black and are easily seen. The ear is a flat oval spot behind the eye and a little lower down. In the common species it is not quite so large as the eye. This is really the eardrum, since there is no external ear like ours. The toad's mouth is wide and its jaws are horny. It does not need teeth since it swallows its prey whole. The toad is a jumper, as may be seen from its long, strong hind legs, the feet of which are also long and strong, and armed with 5 toes that are somewhat webbed. The arms are shorter, and there are 4 fingers to each hand. When the toad is resting, its front feet toe in a comical fashion. If a toad is removed from an earth or moss garden and put into a white wash bowl, in a few hours it will change to a lighter hue, and vice versa. This is part of its protective color, making it inconspicuous to the eyes of its enemy. It prefers to live in cool, damp places, beneath sidewalks or piazzas, etc., and its warty upper surface resembles the surrounding earth. If it is disturbed, it will seek to escape by long leaps and acts frightened, but if very much frightened, it flattens out on the ground and looks so nearly like a clod of earth that it may escape even the keen eyes of its pursuer. When seized by the enemy, it will sometimes play possum, acting as if it were dead. But when actually in the mouth of a foe, it emits terrified and heart-rending cries. The toad's tongue is attached to the lower jaw, at the front edge of the mouth. It can thus be thrust far out, and since it secretes a sticky substance over its surface, any insects which it touches adhere and are drawn back into the mouth and swallowed. It takes a quick eye to see this tongue fly out and make its catch. The tadpole feeds mostly upon vegetable matter, but the toad lives entirely on small animals, usually insects. It is not particular as to what kind of insects, but because of the situations which it haunts, it usually feeds upon those which are injurious to grass and plants. Indeed, the toad is really the friend of the gardener and farmer, and has been most ungratefully treated by those whom it has befriended. If you doubt that a toad is an animal of judgment, watch it when it finds an earthworm, and set your doubts at rest. It will walk around the squirming worm until it can seize it by the head, apparently knowing well that the horny hooks extending backward from the segments of the worm are likely to rasp the throat if swallowed the wrong way. If the worm prove a too large mouthful, the toad promptly uses its hands in an amusing fashion to stuff the wriggling morsel down its throat. When swallowing a large mouthful, it closes its eyes. But whether this Lesson 44. The Tadpole Aquarium. Leading thought. The children should understand how to make the tadpoles comfortable and thus be able to rear them. Materials: a tin or agate pan or a deep earthenware wash bowl. Things to be done: 1. Go to some pond where tadpoles live. 2. Take some of the small stones on the bottom and at the sides of the pond, lifting them very gently so as not to disturb what is growing on their surface. Place these stones on the bottom of the pan, building up one side higher than the other, so that the water will be more shallow on one side than on the other. A stone or 2 should project above the water. 3. Take some mud and leaves from the bottom of the pond, being careful not to disturb them, and place them upon the stones. 4. Take some of the plants found growing under water in the pond and plant them among the stones. 5. Carry the pan, thus prepared, back to the schoolhouse and place it where the sun will not shine directly upon it. 6. Bring a pail of water from the pond and pour it very gently in at one side of the pan, so as not to disarrange the plants. Fill the pan nearly to the brim. 7. After the mud has settled and the water is perfectly clear, remove some of the tadpoles which have hatched in the glass aquarium and place in the pond. Not more than a dozen should be put in a pan of this size, since the amount of food and microscopic plants which are on the stones in the mud will afford food for only a few tadpoles. 8. Every week add a little more mud from the bottom of the pond or another stone covered with slime, which is probably some plant growth. More water from the pond should be added to replace that evaporated. 9. Care should be taken that the tadpole aquarium be kept where the sun will not shine directly upon it for any length of time, because if the water gets too warm, the tadpoles will die. 10. Remove the skin from one side of a tulip leaf so as to expose the pulp of the leaf, and give to the tadpoles every day or two. Bits of hard-boiled eggs should be given now and then. Toads, eggs, and tadpoles. Leading thought. The toad's eggs are laid in strings of jelly in ponds. The eggs hatch into tadpoles, which are creatures of the water, breathing by gills and swimming with a long fin. The tadpoles gradually change to toads, which are air-breathing creatures, fitted for life on dry land. Method. The eggs of the toads may be found in almost any pond about the 1st of May, and may be scraped up from the bottom in a scoop net. They should be placed in the aquarium where the children can watch the stages of development. Soon after they are hatched, a dozen or so should be selected and placed in the tadpole aquarium, and the others put back into the stream. The children should observe the tadpoles every day, watching carefully all the changes of structure and habit which take place. If properly fed, the tadpoles will be ready to leave the water in July as tiny toads. Observations. 1. Where were the toad's eggs found, and on what date? Were they attached to anything in the water, or were they floating free? Are the eggs in long strings? Do you find any eggs laid in jelly-like masses? If so, iris. How does the toad wink? 4. Find and describe the nostrils. Find and describe the ear. Note the swelling above and just back of the ear. Do you know the use of this? 5. What is the shape of the toad's mouth? Has it any teeth? Is the toad's tongue attached to the front or the back part of the mouth? How is it used to catch insects? 6. Describe the arms and hands. How many fingers on the hand? Which way do the fingers point when the toad is sitting down? 7. Describe the legs and feet. How many toes are there? What is the relative length of the toes, and how are they connected? What is this web between the toes for? Why are the hind legs so much larger than the front legs? 8. Will a toad change color if placed upon different colored objects? How long does it take to do this? Of what advantage is this to the toad? 9. Where does the toad live? When it is disturbed, how does it act? How far can it jump? If very frightened, does it flatten out and lie still? Why is this? 10. At what time does a toad come out to hunt insects? How does it catch insects? Does it swallow an earthworm head or tail first? When swallowing an earthworm or large insect, how does it use its hands? How does it act when swallowing a large mouthful? 11. How does the toad drink? Where does it remain during the day? Describe how it burrows into the earth. 12. What happens to the toad in the winter? What does it do in the spring? Is it a good swimmer? How does it use its legs in swimming? 13. How does the toad look when croaking? What sort of a noise does it make? 14. Describe the action of the toad's throat when breathing. Did you ever see a toad shed its skin? 15. What are the toad's enemies? How does it act when caught by a snake? Does it make any noise? Is it swallowed head or tail first? What means has it of escaping or defending itself from its enemies? 16. How is the toad of great use to the farmer and gardener? In the early years, we are not to teach nature as science. We are not to teach it primarily for method or for drill. We are to teach it for loving, and this is nature study. On these points, I make no compromise. L. H. Bailey. End of section 51. Recording by Jill Engel. Botsford, Comstock. Part 2, Animal Life. Chapter 3, Batrachian Study. The Tree Frog, or Tree Toad. Teacher's Story. Ere yet the earliest warbler wakes, of coming spring to tell, from every marsh a chorus breaks, a choir invisible, as if the blossoms underground a breath of utterance had found. Tab. Associated with the first songs of robin and bluebird is the equally delightful chorus of the spring peepers, yet how infrequently do most of us see a member of this invisible choir. There are some creatures which are the quintessence of the slang word cute, which, interpreted, means the perfection of Lilliputian proportions, permeated with undaunted spirit. The chickadee is one of these, and the tree frog is another. I confess to a thrill of delight when the pickerel's hyla lifts itself on its tiny front feet, twists its head knowingly, and turns on me the full gaze of its bronze-rimmed eyes. This is the tiniest froglet of them all, being little more artificial light. The thin membrane beneath the throat swells out until it seems almost large enough to balloon the little chap off his perch. No wonder that, with such a sounding sack, the note is stirring. There are several species of tree frogs that trill in the branches above our heads all summer, and their songs are sometimes mistaken for those of the cicada, which is far more shrill. The tree frogs have toes and fingers ending in little round discs, which secrete at will a substance by means of which they can cling to vertical surfaces, even to glass. In fact, the way to study these wonderful feat is when the frog is climbing up the sides of the glass jar. The fingers are arranged, 2 short inside ones, a long one, and another short one outside. The hind feet have 3 shorter inside toes quite far apart, a long one at the tip of the foot, and a shorter one outside. When climbing a smooth surface like glass, the toes are spread wide apart, and there are other little clinging discs on the lower sides, although not so large as those at the tips. It is by means of these sticky disc-like toes that the tree frogs hold themselves upon the tree trunks. The whole body of the tree frog is covered with little tubercles, which give it a roughened appearance. The eyes are black with the iris of reddish color. The tongue is like that of other frogs, hinged to the front of the lower jaw. It is sticky and can be thrust far out to capture insects, of which the tree frogs eat vast numbers. The hylas breathe by the rapid pulsation of the membrane of the throat, which makes the whole body tremble. The nostrils are 2 tiny holes on either side of the tip of the snout. The ears are a little below and just behind the eyes, and are in the form of a circular slit. The eggs of the spring peepers are laid in ponds during April. Each egg has a little glob of jelly about it, and is fastened to a stone or a water plant. The tadpoles are small and delicate. The underside of the body is reddish and shines with metallic luster. These tadpoles differ from those of other frogs in that they often leave the water while yet the tail is still quite long. In summer, they may be found among the leaves and moss around the banks of ponds. They are indefatigable in hunting for gnats, mosquitoes, and ants. Their destruction of mosquitoes, as pollywogs and as grown-up frogs, renders them of great use to us. The voice of this peeper may be heard among the shrubs and vines, or in trees during late summer and until November. The little creatures sleep beneath the frog. Teacher's Story. The stroller along brooksides is likely to be surprised some day at seeing a bit of moss and earth suddenly make a high leap and a far one, without apparent provocation. An investigation resolves the clump of moss into a brilliantly green and yellow striped frog. And then the stroller wonders how he could have overlooked such an obvious creature. But the leopard frog is only obvious when it is out of its environment. The common green frog is quite as well protected since its color is exactly that of green pools. Most frogs spend their lives in or about water, and if caught on land, they make great leaps to reach their native element. The leopard frog and a few other species sometimes wander far afield. In form, the frog is more slim than the toad and is not covered with great warts. It is cold and slippery to the touch. The frog's only chance of escaping its enemies is through the slipperiness of its body and by making long, rapid leaps.
As a jumper, the frog is much more powerful than the toad because its hind legs are so much larger and more muscular in comparison with its size. The first toe in the front feet of the leopard frog is much swollen, making a fat thumb. The mechanics of the hind legs make it possible for the frog to feather the webbed feet as it swims. On the bottom of the toes are hardened places at the joints, and sometimes others besides, which give the foot a strong hold when pushing for the jump. The toed tips, when they are pressed against glass, resemble slightly the tree toad's discs. The hind foot is very long, while on the front foot the toes radiate, almost in a circle. The foot and leg are colored like the back of the body above, and on the underside resemble the under parts. The frog is likely to be much more brightly colored than the toad, and usually has much of green and yellow in its dress. But the frog lives among green things, while it is to the toad's advantage to be the color of the soil. Frogs also have the chameleon power of changing color to harmonize with their environment. I have seen a very green leopard frog change to a slate gray when placed upon slate-colored rock. The change took place in the green portions. The common green frog will likewise change to slate color in a similar situation. A leopard frog changed quickly from dark green to pale olive when it was placed in the water after having been on the soil. The eyes of frogs are very prominent and are beautiful when observed closely. The green frog has a dark bronze iris with a gleaming gold edge around the pupil and around the outer margin. The eye of the leopard frog is darker. The iris seems to be black with specks of ruddy gold scattered through it, and there is an outer band of red gold around the margin. When the frog winks, the nictitating membrane rises from below and covers the whole eye, and when the frog makes a special effort of any sort, it has a comical way of drawing its eyes back into its head. When trying to hide at the bottom of the aquarium, the leopard species lets the eyelids fall over the eyes so that they do not shine up and attract pursuers. The ear is in a similar position to that of the toad, and in the bullfrog is larger than the eye. In the green frog, it is a dull grayish disc, almost as large as the eye. In the leopard frog, it is not so large as the eye and has a giltish spot at the center. The nostrils are small and are closed when below the water, as may be easily seen by a lens. The mouth opens widely, the corners extending back under the eye. The jaws are horny and are armed with teeth, which are for the purpose of biting off food, rather than for chewing it. When above water, the throat keeps up a rhythmic motion, which is the process of breathing, but when below water, this motion ceases. The food of frogs is largely composed of insects that frequent damp places or that live in the water. The sound sacs of the frogs, instead of being beneath the throat, as is the case with toads and tree frogs, are at the side of the throat, and when inflated may extend from just back of the eyes out above the front legs. The song is characteristic and pleasant to listen to, if not too close by. Perhaps exception should be made to the lay of the bullfrog, which, like the song of some noted opera singers, is more wonderful than musical. The boom of the bullfrog pouts the ancient parish. Alders the creaking redwings sink on, tussocks that house blithe Bob o' Lincoln, hedged round the unassailed seclusion where muskrats piled their cells Carthusian, and many a moss-embroidered log, the watering place of summer frog, slept and decayed with patient skill, as watering places sometimes will. Now in this abbey of the Leam, which realized the fairest dream that ever dozing bullfrog had, sunned on a half-sunk lily pad, there rose a party with a mission to mend the pollywog's condition, who notified the selectmen to call a meeting there and then. "Some kind of steps," they said, "are needed. They don't come on so fast as we did. Let's dock their tails. If that don't make 'em frogs, by brevet, the old one take 'em. That boy that came the other day to dig some flagroot down this way, his jackknife left, and 'tis a sign that heaven approves of our design. 'Twere wicked not to urge the step on when Providence has sent the weapon."
old croakers, deacons of the mire, that led the deep batrachian choir, unk, 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 with bass that might have left the Blanches out of sight, shook knobby heads and said, "No, go, you better let him try to grow. Old Doctor Time is slow, but still he does know how to make a pill." But vain was all their hoarsest bass, their old experience out of place. In spite of croaking and entreating, the vote was carried in marsh meeting. "Lord knows," protest the pollywogs, "we're anxious to be grown-up frogs, but don't push in to do the work of nature till she proves a shirk. 'Tis not by jumps that she advances, but wins her way by circumstances. Pray, wait a while, until you know we're so contrived as not to grow. Let nature take her own direction, and she'll absorb our imperfection. You mightn't like 'em to appear with, but we must have the things to steer with." "No," piped the party of reform, "all great results are ta'en by storm. Fate holds her best gifts till we show we've strength to make her let them go. The providence that works in history, and seems to some folks such a mystery, does not creep slowly on incog, but moves by jumps, a mighty frog. No more reject the age's chrism, your cues are an anachronism. No more the future's promise mock, but lay your tails upon the block, thankful that we the means have voted to have you thus to frogs promoted." The thing was done, the tails were cropped, and home each phylloed tadpole hopped, in faith rewarded to exult, and wait the beautiful result. Too soon it came, our pool, so long the theme of patriot bullfrog's song, next day was reeking, fit to smother, with heads and tails that missed each other. Here snoutless tails, there tailless snouts, the only gainers were the pouts. Moral: from lower to the higher next, not to the top is nature's text. An embryo good, to reach full stature, absorbs the evil in its nature. Lowell. End of section 53. Batrachian study. The newt, eft, or salamander. Teacher's story. After a rain in spring or summer, we see these little orange-red creatures sprawling along roads or woodland paths, and since they are rarely seen except after rain, the wise people of old declared they rained down, which was an easy way for explaining their presence. But the newts do not rain down. They rain up instead, since if they have journeys to make, they must needs go forth when the ground is wet. Otherwise they would dry up and die. Thus the newts make a practice of never going out except when it rains. A closer view of the eft shows plenty of peculiarities in its appearance to interest us. Its colors are decidedly gay, the body color being orange, ornamented with vermilion dots along each side of the back, each red dot margined with tiny black specks. But the eft is careless about these decorations and may have more spots on one side than on the other. Besides these vermilion dots, it is also adorned with black specks here and there, and especially along its sides, looks as if it had been peppered. The newt's greatest beauty lies in its eyes. These are black, with elongated pupils, almost parallel with the length of the head, and bordered above and below with bands of golden, shining iris, which give the eyes a fascinating brilliancy. The nostrils are mere pinholes in the end of the snout. The legs and feet look queerly inadequate for such a long body, since they are short and far apart. There are 4 toes on the front feet and 5 on the hind feet, the latter being decidedly pudgy. The legs are thinner where they join the body and wider toward the feet. The eft can move very rapidly with its scant equipment of legs. It has a misleading way of remaining motionless for a long time and then darting forward like a flash, its long body falling into graceful curves as it moves. But it can go very slowly when exploring. It then places its little hands cautiously and lifts its head as high as its short arms will allow in order to take observations. Although it can see quite well, yet on an unusual surface like glass, it seems to feel the way by touching its lower lip to the surface as if to test it.
The tail is flattened at the sides and is used to twine around objects in time of need. And I am sure it is also used to push the eft when crawling, for it curves this way and that vigorously as the feet progress, and obviously pushes against the ground. Then, too, the tail is an aid when, by some chance, the eft is turned over on its back, for with its help it can right itself speedily. The eft's method of walking is interesting. It moves forward one front foot, and then the hind foot on the other side. After a stop for rest, it begins just where it left off when it again starts on. Its beautiful eyes seem to serve the newt well indeed, for I find that, when it sees my face approaching the moss jar, it climbs promptly over to the other side. There are no eyelids for the golden eyes, but the eft can pull them back into its head and close the slit after them, thus making them very safe. The eft with whose acquaintance I was most favored was not yet mature and was afraid of earthworms, but he was very fond of plant lice, and it was fun to see the little creature stalking them. A big rose plant louse would be squirming with satisfaction as it sucked the juice of the leaf, when the eft would catch sight of it, and become greatly excited, evidently holding his breath since the pulsating throat would become rigid. There was a particularly alert attitude of the whole front part of the body, and especially of the eyes and the head. Then the neck would stretch out long and thin, the orange snout approach stealthily within half an inch of the smug aphid, and then there was a flash as of lightning, something too swift to see coming out of the eft's mouth and swooping up the unsuspecting louse. Then there would be a gulp or two, and all would be over. If the aphid happened to be a big one, the eft made a visible effort to swallow it. Sometimes his eft-ship would become greatly excited when he first saw the plant louse, and he would sneeze and snort in a very comical way, like a dog when eager for game. The following is the history of the species, as summarized from Mrs. S.H. Gage's charming Story of Little Red Spot. The egg was laid in some fresh water pond or the still borders of some stream where there is a growth of waterweed. The egg, which is about the size of a small pea, is fastened to a water plant. It is covered with a tough but translucent envelope and has at the center a little yellowish globule. In a little less than a month, the eft hatches, but it looks very different from the form with which we are most familiar. It has gray stripes upon its sides and 3 tiny bunches of red gills on each side, just back of its broad head. The tail is long and very thin, surrounded by a fin. It is an expert swimmer and breathes water as does a fish. After a time it becomes greenish above and buff below, and by the middle of August it develops legs and has changed its form so that it is able to live upon land. It no longer has gills or fins. Soon the coat changes to the bright orange hue, which makes the little creature so conspicuous. The newt usually keeps hidden among moss, or under leaves, or in decaying wood, or other damp and shady places. But after a rain, when the whole world is damp, it feels confidence enough to go out in the open and hunt for food. For 2½ years it lives upon land, and then returns to the water. When this impulse comes upon it, it may be far from any stream, but it seems to know instinctively where to go. Soon after it enters the water, it is again transformed in color, becoming olive green above and buff below, although it still retains the red spots along the back, as mementos of its land life, and it also retains the pepper-like dots. Its tail develops a fin which extends along its back and is somewhat ruffled. In some mysterious way it develops the power to again breathe the air which is mixed with water. The male has hind legs very large and flat. The female is lighter in color and has more delicate and smaller legs. It is here in the water that the efts find their mates and finish careers which must have surely been hazardous. During its long and varied life, the eft often sheds its skin like the snake. It has a strange habit of swallowing its cast-off coat. Lesson 48. The Newt, Eft, or Salamander. Leading thought. The newts change their form 3 times to fit different modes of life. They are born in the water, and at first have fins and gills like fishes. They then live on land and have lungs for breathing air, and lose their fins. Later they go back to the water and again develop the power of breathing the oxygen contained in water, and also a fin. Method. The little orange eft or red-spotted salamander may be kept in an aquarium which has in it an object, as a stone or a clump of moss, which projects above the water. For food it should be given small earthworms, or leaves covered with plant lice. In this way it may be studied at leisure. Observations. 1. Look at the eft closely. Is it all the same color? How many spots upon its back, and what colors are they? Are there the same number of spots on both sides? Are there any spots or dots besides those larger ones? How does the eft resemble a toad? 2. Is the head the widest part of the body? Describe the eyes, the shape and color of the pupil and of the iris. How does the eft wink? Do you think it can see well? 3. Can you see the nostrils? How does the throat move, and why? 4. Are both pairs of legs the same size? How many toes on the front feet? How many toes on the hind feet? Does the eft toe in with its front feet like a toad? 5. Does it move more than 1 foot at a time when walking? Does it use the feet on the same side in 2 consecutive steps? After putting forward the right front foot, what foot follows next? Can it move backward? 6. Is the tail as long as the head and body together? Is the tail round or flat at the sides? How is it used to help the eft when traveling? Does the tail drag or is it lifted? Or does it push by squirming? 7. How does the eft act when startled? Does it examine its surroundings? Do you think it can see and is afraid of you? 8. Why do we find these creatures only during wet weather? Why do people think they rain down? 9. What does the eft eat? How does it catch its prey? Does it shed its skin? How many kinds of efts have you seen? 10. From what kind of egg does the eft hatch? When is its egg laid? How does it look? On what is it fastened? 11. How many times during its life does the orange eft change color? What part of its life is spent upon land? What changes take place in its form when it leaves the water for life upon land? And what changes take place in its structure when it returns to the water? End of section 54. Botsford, Comstock. Part 2. Animal Life. Chapter 4. Reptile Study. Yet, when a child and barefoot, I more than once at morn have passed, I thought, a whiplash unbraided in the sun, when, stooping to secure it, it wrinkled and was gone. Emily Dickinson. If the teacher could bring herself to take as much interest as Mother Eve in that subtle animal, as the Bible calls the serpent, she might, through such interest, enter the paradise of the boyish heart, instead of losing a paradise of her own. How many teachers who haven't true? The rattlesnake still holds its own in the rocky mountainous places, and the moccasin haunts the bayous of the southern coast. However, in most localities, snakes are not only harmless, but are beneficial to the farmer. The superstition that if a snake is killed, its tail will live until sundown is general and has but slender foundation in the fact that snakes, being lower in their nerve organization than mammals, the process of death is a slow one. Some people firmly believe that snakes spring or jump from the ground to seize their prey, which is quite false, since no snake jumps clear of the ground as it strikes, nor does it spring from a perfect coil. Nor are snakes slimy. Quite to the contrary, they are covered with perfectly dry scales. But the most general superstition of all is that when a snake thrusts out its tongue, it is an act of animosity.
The fact is, the tongue is a sense organ and is used as an insect uses its feelers or antennae, and the act is also supposed to aid the creature in hearing. Thus, when a snake thrusts out its tongue, it is simply trying to find out about its surroundings and what is going on. Snakes are the only creatures able to swallow objects larger than themselves. This is rendered possible by the elasticity of the body walls and the fact that snakes have an extra bone hinging the upper to the lower jaw, allowing them to spread widely. The lower jaw also separates at the middle of its front edge and spreads apart sideways. In order to force a creature into a bag, so manifestly too small, a special mechanism is needed. The teeth supply this by pointing backward, and thus assist in the swallowing. The snake moves by literally walking on the ends of its ribs, which are connected with the crosswise plates on its lower side. Each of these crosswise plates has the hind edge projecting down so that it can hold to an object. Thus, the graceful, noiseless progress of the snake is brought about by many of these crosswise plates worked by the movement of the ribs. Some species of snakes simply chase their prey, striking at it and catching it in the open mouth, while others, like the black snake, wind themselves about their victims, crushing them to death. Snakes can live a long time without food. Many instances on record show that they have been able to exist a year or more without anything to eat. In our northern climate, they hibernate in winter, going to sleep as soon as the weather becomes cold and not waking up until spring. As snakes grow, they shed their skins. This occurs only 2 or 3 times a year. The crested flycatcher adorns its nest with these phantom snakes. The garter or garden snake. Teacher's story. A chipmunk or a sudden whirring quail is startled by my step as on I fare. A garter snake across the dusty trail glances and is not there. Riley. Garter snakes can be easily tamed and are ready to meet friendly advances halfway. A handsome yellow-striped black garter lived for 4 years beneath our piazza and was very friendly and unafraid of the family. The children of the campus made it frequent visits and never seemed to be wary of watching it, but the birds objected to it very much, although it never attempted to reach their nests in the vine above. The garter snakes are the most common of all in our northeastern states. They vary much in color. The ground color may be olive, brown, or black, and down the center of the back is usually a yellow, green, or whitish stripe, usually bordered by a darker band of ground color. On each side is a similar stripe, but not so brightly colored. Sometimes the middle stripe and sometimes the side stripes are broken into spots or absent. The lower side is greenish-white or yellow. When fully grown, the snake is about 3 feet in length. The garters are likely to congregate in numbers in places favorable for hibernation, like rocky ledges or stony side hills. Here, each snake finds a safe crevice or makes a burrow, which sometimes extends a yard or more underground. During the warm days of Indian summer, these winter hermits crawl out in the middle of the day and sun themselves, retiring again to their hermitages when the air grows chilly toward night. And when the cold weather arrives, they go to sleep and do not awaken until the first warm days of spring. Then, if the sun shines hot, they crawl out and bask in its welcome rays. After the warm weather comes, the snakes scatter to other localities more favorable for finding food, and thus these hibernating places are deserted during the summer. The banks of streams and the edges of woods are places which furnish snakes their food, which consists of earthworms, insects, toads, salamanders, frogs, etc. The young are born late in July and are about 6 inches long at birth. One mother may have in her brood from 11 to 50 snakelings. She stays with them during the fall to protect them, and there are many stories about the way the young ones run down the mother's throat in case of attack. But as yet no scientist has seen this act or placed it on record. The little snakes shift for their own food, catching small toads, earthworms, and insects. If it finds food in plenty, the garter snake will mature in 1 year. Hawks, crows, skunks, weasels, and other predaceous animals seem to find the garter snake attractive food. Lesson 49. The Garter or Garden Snake. Leading thought. The garter snake is a common and harmless little creature and has many interesting habits which are worth studying. Method. A garter snake may be captured and placed in a box with a glass cover and thus studied in detail in the classroom. But the lesson should begin with observations made by the children on the snakes in their native haunts. Observations. 1. What are the colors and markings of your garter snake? Do the stripes extend along the head as well as the body? How long is it? 2. Describe its eyes, its ears, its nostrils, and its mouth. 3. If you disturb it, how does it act? Why does it thrust its tongue out? What shape is its tongue? 4. In what position is the snake when it rests? Can you see how it moves? Look upon the lower side. Can you see the little plates extending crosswise? Do you think it moves by moving these plates? Let it crawl across your hand and see if you can tell how it moves. 5. What does a garter snake eat? Did you ever see one swallow a toad? A frog? Did it take it head first or tail first? 6. Where does the garter spend the winter? How early does it appear in the spring? 7. At what time of year do you see the young snakes? Do the young ones run down the throat of the mother for safety when attacked? Does the mother snake defend her young? 8. What enemies has the garter snake? No life in earth or air or sky. The sunbeams, broken silently, on the bared rocks around me lie. Cold rocks with half-warmed lichens scarred, and scales of moss, and scarce a yard away one long strip yellow-barred, lost in a cleft. 'Tis but a stride to reach it, thrust its roots aside, and lift it on thy stick astride. Yet stay! That moment is thy grace, for round thee, thrilling air and space, a chattering terror fills the place. A sound as of dry bones that stir in the dead valley. By yon fir the locust stops its noonday whir. The wild bird hears, smote with the sound, as if by bullet brought to ground on broken wing, dips, wheeling round. The hare, transfixed with trembling lip, halts breathless on pulsating hip, and palsied tread, and heels that slip. Enough, old friend, 'tis thou. Forget my heedless foot, nor longer fret the peace with thy grim castanet. From Crotalus, the Rattlesnake, Bret Harte. End of section 55. Recording by Jill Engel. The Milk Snake or Spotted Adder. Teacher's Story. The grass divides as with a comb, a spotted shaft is seen, and then it closes at your feet and opens farther on. Emily Dickinson. This is the snake which is said to milk cows. A most absurd belief. It would not milk a cow if it could, and it could not if it would. It has never yet been induced to drink milk when in captivity, and if it were very thirsty, it could not drink more than 2 teaspoonfuls of milk at most. Thus, in any case, its depredations upon the milk supply need not be feared. Its object in frequenting milk houses and stables is far other than the milking of cows, for it is an inveterate hunter of rats and mice, and is thus of great benefit to the farmer. It is a constrictor, and squeezes its prey to death in its coils. The ground color of the milk snake is pale gray, but it is covered with so many brown or dark gray saddle-shaped blotches that they seem rather to form the ground color. The lower side is white, marked with square black spots and blotches. The snake attains a length of about 3 feet when fully grown. Although it is called commonly the spotted adder, it does not belong to the adders at all, but to the family of the king snakes. During July and August, the mother snake lays from 7 to 20 eggs. They are deposited in loose soil, in moist rubbish, in compost heaps, etc. The egg is a symmetrical oval in shape and is about 1 1/8 inches long by a 1/2 inch in diameter. The shell is soft and white, like kid leather, and the egg resembles a puffball. The young hatch nearly 2 months after the eggs are laid. Meanwhile, the eggs have increased in size so that the snakelings are nearly 8 inches long when they hatch. The saddle-shaped blotches on the young have much red in them. The milk snake is not venomous. It will sometimes, in defense, try to chew the hand of the captor, but the wounds it can inflict are very slight and heal quickly. Lesson 50. The milk snake, or spotted adder. Leading thought. The milk snake is found around stables where it hunts for rats and mice, but never milks the cows. Method. Although the snake acts fiercely, it is perfectly harmless and may be captured in the hands and placed in a glass-covered box for a study in the schoolroom.
The water snake. Teacher's story. Every boy that goes fishing knows the snake found commonly about mill dams and wharves, or on rocks and bushes near the water. The teacher will have accomplished a great work if these boys are made to realize that this snake is a more interesting creature for study than as an object to pelt with stones. The water snake is a dingy brown in color, with cross bands of brownish or reddish brown, which spread out into blotches at the side. Its color is very protective as it lies on stones or logs in its favorite attitude of sunning itself. It is very local in its habits and generally has a favorite place for basking and returns to it year after year on sunny days. This snake lives mostly upon frogs and salamanders and fish. However, it preys usually upon fish of small value, so it is of little economic importance. It catches its victims by chasing and seizing them in its jaws. It has a very keen sense of smell, and probably traces its prey in this manner, something as a hound follows a fox. It is an expert swimmer, usually lifting the head a few inches above the water when swimming, although it is able to dive and remain below the water for a short time. The water snake is a bluffer, and when cornered it flattens itself and strikes fiercely. But its teeth contain no poison, and it can inflict only slight and harmless wounds. When acting as if it would rather fight than eat, if given a slight chance to escape, it will flee to the water like a streak of greased lightning, as any boy will assure you. The water snake attains a length of about 4 feet. The young do not hatch from eggs, but are born alive in August and September. They differ much in appearance from their parents, as they are pale gray in color with jet black crossbands. Lesson 51. The water snake. Leading thought. The water snake haunts the banks of streams because its food consists of creatures that live in and about water. Method. If water snakes are found in the locality, encourage the boys to capture one without harming it and bring it to school for observation. However, as the water snake is very local in its habits and haunts the same place year after year, it will be better nature study to get the children to observe it in its native surroundings. Observations. Where is the water snake found? How large is the largest one you ever saw? 2. Why does the water snake live near water? What is its food? How does it catch its prey? 3. Describe how the water snake swims. How far does its head project above the water when swimming? How long can it stay completely beneath the water? 4. Describe the markings and colors of the water snake. How do these colors protect it from observation? How do the young look? 5. Does each water snake have a favorite place for sunning itself? 6. Where do the water snakes spend the winter? May 12th, 1858. Found a large water adder by the edge of farmer's large mud hole, which abounds with tadpoles and frogs, on which it was probably feeding. It was sunning on the bank, and would face me and dart its head toward me when I tried to drive it from the water. It is barred above, but indistinctly when out of the water, so that it appears almost uniformly dark brown. But in the water, broad reddish-brown bars are seen, very distinctly, alternating with dark brown ones. The head was very flat and suddenly broader than the neck behind. Beneath it was whitish and reddish flesh color. It was about 2 inches in diameter at the thickest part. The inside of its mouth and throat was pink. They are the biggest and most formidable-looking snakes that we have. It was awful to see it wind along the bottom of the ditch at last, raising wreaths of mud amid the tadpoles, to which it must be a very sea serpent. I afterward saw another running under Sam Barrett's grist mill the same afternoon. He said that he saw a water snake, which he distinguished from a black snake, in an apple tree nearby last year, with a robin in its mouth, having taken it from the nest. There was a cleft or fork in the tree which enabled it to ascend. Thoreau's Journal. End of section 57. Recording by Jill Engel. The Turtle. Teacher's Story. A turtle is, at its heart, a misanthrope. Its shell is, in itself, proof of its owner's distrust of this world. But we need not wonder at this misanthropy if we think for a moment of the creatures that lived on this earth at the time when turtles first appeared. Almost any of us would have been glad of a shell in which to retire if we had been contemporaries of the Smilodon and other monsters of the earlier geologic times. When the turtle feels safe and walks abroad for pleasure, his head projects far from the front end of his shell, and the legs, so wide and soft that they look as if they had no bones in them, project out at the side, while the little pointed tail brings up an undignified rear. But frighten him, and at once head, legs, and tail all disappear, and even if we turn him over, we see nothing but the tip of the nose, the claws of the feet, and the tail turned deftly sidewise. When frightened, he hisses threateningly. The noise seems to be made while the mouth is shut, and the breath emitted through the nostrils. The upper shell of the turtle is called the carapace, and the lower shell the plastron. There is much difference in the different species of turtles in the shape of the upper shell and the size and shape of the lower one. In most species, the carapace is subglobular, but in some it is quite flat. The upper shell is grown fast to the backbone of the animal, and the lower shell to the breastbone. The markings and colors of the shell offer excellent subjects for drawing. The painted terrapin has a red mottled border to the shell, very ornamental. The wood turtle has a shell made up of plates, each of which is ornamented with concentric ridges. And the box turtle has a front and rear trapdoor, hinged to the plastron, which can be pulled up against the carapace when the turtle wishes to retire, thus covering it entirely. The turtle's head is decidedly snake-like. Its colors differ with different species. The wood turtle has a triangular, horny covering on the top of the head, in which the color and beautiful pattern of the shell are repeated. The underparts are brick red with indistinct yellowish lines under the jaw. The eyes are black with a yellow iris, which somehow gives them a look of intelligence. The turtle has no eyelids like our own, but has a nictitating membrane, which comes up from below and completely covers the eye. If we seize the turtle by the head and attempt to touch its eyes, we can see the use of this eyelid. When the turtle winks, it seems to turn the eyeball down against the lower lid, The sense of smell in turtles is not well developed, as may be guessed by the very small nostrils, which are mere pinholes in the snout. The mouth is a more or less hooked beak, and is armed with cutting edges instead of teeth. The constant pulsation in the throat is caused by the turtle swallowing air for breathing. The turtle's legs, although so large and soft, have bones within them, as the skeleton shows. The claws are long and strong. There are 5 claws on the front and 4 on the hind feet. Some species have a distinct web between the toes. In others, it is less marked, depending upon whether the species lives mostly in water or out of it. The color of the turtle's body varies with the species. The body is covered with coarse, rough skin made up of various sized plates. The enemies of turtles are the larger fishes and other turtles. 2 turtles should never be kept in the same aquarium, since they eat each other's tails and legs with great relish. They feed upon insects, small fish, or almost anything soft-bodied which they can find in the water. They are especially fond of earthworms. The species which frequent the land feed upon tender vegetation and also eat berries. In an aquarium, a turtle should be fed earthworms, chopped fresh beef, lettuce leaves, and berries. The wood turtle is especially fond of cherries. The aquarium should always have in it a stone or some other object projecting above the water, so that the turtle may climb out if it chooses. In winter, turtles bury themselves in the ooze at the bottom of ponds and streams. Their eggs have white, leathery shells, are oblong or round, and are buried by the mother in the sand or soil near a stream or pond. The long life of turtles is a well-authenticated fact. Dates carved upon their shells show them to have attained the age of 30 or 40 years. The following are, perhaps, the most common species of turtles. A. The snapping turtle. This sometimes attains a shell 14 inches long and a weight of 40 pounds. It is a vicious creature and inflicts a severe wound with its sharp, hooked beak. It should not be used for a nature study lesson unless the specimen is very young. B. The mud turtle. The musk turtle and the common mud turtle both inhabit slow streams and ponds. They are truly aquatic and only come to shore to deposit their eggs. They cannot eat unless they are under water, and they seek their food in the muddy bottoms. The musk turtle, when handled, emits a very strong odor. It has on each side of the head 2 broad yellow stripes. The mud turtle has no odor. Its head is ornamented with greenish-yellow spots. C. The painted terrapin or pond turtle. This can be determined by the red mottled border of its shell. It makes a good pet if kept in an aquarium by itself, but will destroy other creatures. It will eat meat or chopped fish, and is fond of earthworms and soft insects. D. The spotted turtle. This has the upper shell black, with numerous round yellow spots upon it. It is common in ponds and marshy streams, and its favorite perch is, with many of its companions, upon a log. It feeds underwater, eating insect larvae, dead fish, and vegetation. It likes fresh lettuce. E. The wood terrapin. This is our most common turtle. It is found in damp woods and wet places, since it lives largely upon the land. Its upper shell often reaches a length of 6 1/2 inches, and is made up of many plates, ornamented with concentric ridges. This is the turtle upon whose shell people carve initials and dates, and then set it free. All the fleshy parts of this turtle, except the top of the head and the limbs, are brick red. It feeds on tender vegetables, berries, and insects. It makes an interesting pet and will soon learn to eat from the fingers of its master. F. The box turtle. This is easily distinguished from the others because the front and rear portions of the lower shell are hinged so that they can be pulled up against the upper shell. When this turtle is attacked, it draws into the shell and closes both front and back doors, and is very safe from its enemies. It lives entirely upon land and feeds upon berries, tender vegetation, and insects. It lives to a great age. G. The soft-shelled turtle. These are found in streams and canals. The upper shell looks as if it were one piece of soft leather and resembles a griddle cake. Although soft-shelled, these turtles are far from soft-tempered and must be handled with care. Lesson 52. The Turtle. Leading thought. The turtle's shell is for the purpose of protecting its owner from the attack of enemies. Some turtles live upon land, and others in water. Method. A turtle of any kind in the schoolroom is all that is needed to make this lesson interesting. Observations. 1. How much can you see of the turtle when it is walking? If you disturb it, what does it do? How much of it can you see then? Can you see more of it from the lower side than the upper? What is the advantage to the turtle of having such a shell? 2. Compare the upper shell with the lower as follows. How are they shaped differently? What is their difference in color? Would it be a disadvantage to the turtle if the upper shell were as light-colored as the lower? Why? Make a drawing of the upper and the lower shell showing the shape of the plates of which they are composed. Where are the two grown together? 3. Is the border of the upper shell different from the central portion in color and markings? Is the edge smooth or scalloped? 4. How far does the turtle's head project from the front of the shell? What is the shape of the head? With what colors and pattern is it marked? Describe the eyes. How are they protected? How does the turtle wink? Can you discover the little eyelid which comes up from below to cover the eye? 5. Describe the nose and nostrils. Do you think it has a keen sense of smell? 6. Describe the mouth. Are there any teeth? With what does it bite off its food? Describe the movement of the throat. Why is this constant pulsation? 7. What is the shape of the leg? How is it marked? How many claws on the front feet? Are any of the toes webbed? On which feet are the webbed toes? Why should they be webbed? Describe the way a turtle swims. Which feet are used for oars? 8. Describe the tail. How much of it can be seen when the turtle is walking? What becomes of it when the turtle withdraws into its shell? 9. How much of the turtle's body can you see? What is its color? Is it rough or smooth? 10. What are the turtle's enemies? How does it escape from them? What noise does the turtle make when frightened or angry? 11. Do all